Turns out the teacher's lounge was way darker than we ever imagined. Insider stories. I think the biggest surprise for me was that the teacher I adored as a kid was actually kind of a D-bag. I loved him as a teacher when I was a 14-year-old, but I can't stand him as a colleague. This happened in a weird way to me while I was still in high school. Teacher taught freshmen and seniors. Thought she was amazing as a freshman, seemed laid back and funny. Realized how disorganized and unhelpful she was as a senior. It was awful. My third grade teacher was killed when her car got stuck on the train tracks. Her husband was the principal. After, I found out through parents that everyone was starting to suspect that the principal was seeing one of the teacher's aides. It was one of those uncomfortable things where a lot of the mums were after him because he was single, and so they were incredibly jealous and petty towards this particular aide. Years later, I found out the principal and this aide got married. Years after that, when they were both gone, I started working with my old elementary school. And that is when I found out the truth, that the aide and principal had started having an affair back when my third grade teacher was still alive. She found out about their affair and her death was not an accident. She was actually on the phone with the aide when she purposely drove her car onto the train tracks. I interned at my old elementary school and subbed at the high school. Honestly, it wasn't as wild and debaucherous as some folks wish it to be. My biggest revelations were my old music teacher would fall asleep during after-school meetings and professional development with regularity. The sweet fourth grade teacher actually took no crap at all during after-school meetings if someone was trying to push policy or curriculum that made no sense. And high school teachers would gossip in teachers' lounge about students, though generally only occasionally in passing. And not always scandalous gossip, just generally more aware of each student's social life than I'd ever imagined there'd be. An example would be something like, "Oh, how's Steve today?" "Well, he turned in his homework, but it was incomplete. Didn't really participate today. I heard he and Kristen weren't really talking anymore. Yeah, he seems like he's going through a rough time now, but I think he's going to be better off in the long run." In hindsight, it was weird to consider that these folks were likely talking about me and my personal life in various regards a few years prior. I always assumed my school life was relatively insular, but teachers see a lot more than we think. Oh God, I wonder what my teacher said about me. How can someone behave so much like a nerd and still do so badly at school? Probably best not to contemplate it. Yeah, teachers are ordinary people, folks. All of the staff hated the deputy principal as much as the students did, if not more. I remember my teacher mum telling my dad one day how her principal has turned into such an A1 witch. I found out the school I work at has a decommissioned shooting range in the basement. Shooting used to actually be taught in US schools. It's probably more widespread than most of us think. I didn't end up working at my old school, but I did run into my old guidance counselor, who had since moved districts, at a conference. I was mentioning the teachers I'd had and that the photography teacher always creeped me out. He confirmed that said teacher had been quietly fired for his inappropriate conduct around students, and this was at a school where my AP history teacher was actually married to a former student. Nothing to see here, folks. Marriages and divorces, depressions, cancers, all of that crap about the teachers that you sometimes suspected, but never really knew for sure. Also, teachers can be ruthless when talking about kids, but it's funny as hell. Drinking wine with some of my former teachers was frickin' weird, but 100% would recommend. My mum did her student teaching at the Catholic high school she attended. She didn't know that while she'd been away at university, one of her favorite teaching nuns had left the order and gotten hitched. She almost had a heart attack when she recognized Sister Mary Irony in the halls one day and realized she had a solid 7-month pregnant belly. I was a terrible math student, but always pulled A's in geometry. Turns out my mum had been doing special favors for Mr. Davis, my teacher. Looks like it was your mom who was getting the D's. I'm not a teacher, but when I was in high school, a racy picture had been discovered on a flash drive that a male teacher gave to students if they didn't have a flash drive, so that they could work on projects from the school computers at home if necessary. Obviously, an investigation went underway and it was found that another student had put the pictures on the drive. But amidst all the chaos and rampant rumors, it was discovered that the male teacher was having an affair with one of the social studies female teachers, who was also married. The male teacher is still currently with his wife, while the female social studies teacher divorced her husband, thinking that that other guy was leaving his wife for her. Fricking spicy as a 17-year-old. I've got a friend who used to teach social studies, and I almost thought you were talking about her situation for a moment. She got caught in an affair with the Spanish teacher. Both couples ended up getting a divorce. The end result was their former spouses met and got married, the Spanish teacher is now single and sleeping with multiple other teachers, and my friend got fired, never found another teaching job, and moved to another state to try to clean up her reputation. Mrs. X, who was always the jerk advanced placement English teacher. She hated the more inappropriate parts of our advanced placement English books. Turns out her husband had cheated on her and she was in the middle of an unpleasant divorce. No wonder she couldn't stand any doing of the deed in famous literature. I'm definitely not sorry for feeling she was a jerk, but boy did it suddenly make a lot more sense. My mum is a teacher at a school I went to, and I still learned a few things. Two things come to mind. The kind of reserved science teacher has a full sleeve of tattoos. That was a bit of a surprise. Also, every year the school does a raffle with a bunch of cool little items in it. I found out recently that it's rigged to go to a poor student. I mean, I'm not complaining, but I always really wanted to win it. I was shocked when I found this out. My dad used to be the head teacher of a school that fixed the raffle in the exact same way. They told the kid that he'd won and sent him home with a huge gift hamper. The next day, my dad asked the kid if he'd eaten any of the chocolate yet, and the kid said, "Yep, the whole bar." My dad was surprised because there was a lot more than one chocolate bar in that hamper, so he asked a few more questions. Turns out the kid's mum had immediately sold the entire hamper for substance money except for that one bar of chocolate. I worked at the school I attended. Nothing too weird, but drinking and hanging out with your former teachers and principals is kinda cool, honestly. Rampant smoking. When I was in junior high, I got to keep a project in the teacher's lounge, and for a week I was treated to the permanent cloud of smoke that hung in it. Everybody except the gym teachers smoked like chimneys. In between periods, they'd run to the lounge for a quick drag or two and then dash back to their rooms. I have no idea how they managed after smoking in public buildings was banned. After smoking in public buildings was banned, there was a law stating you couldn't smoke unless you were X meter away from the schools, as some teachers would run to the gate and smoke there. All of a sudden, we were having issues with students smoking in the bathrooms. Fun part was, the smoke never came from the students' bathrooms. My school had an old lunchroom, an entire portion of the building that was only accessible through 2 doors. I can't say with certainty that this is true, but rumor has it several teachers ended up turning that room into a suitable living area and slept there for a few months. I didn't think it was that crazy until I remembered that at least 2 of those teachers had a history of substance use. We're talking your Lucy in the Skies with Diamonds, your Molly, and your White Snow. What went on in that old lunchroom is anyone's guess. My 4th grade teacher was being treated horribly by her husband. Not only that, she was his 4th wife. The first one divorced him, the next 2 disappeared, and the husband is now on death row for my teacher's murder. We discovered that they have a secret basement. My school did too, and there was a rumor that there was a tunnel as well that connected the high school to the one across the road. 2 guys from our drumline found the secret basement and ended up getting suspended because of it. It was supposed to be a secret, but the entire band knew why. Our high school had that too, but we were split into 2 campuses, so the rumor was that they'd connected the campuses. Turns out it was a shooting range over 30 years ago, and now it's just the basement area underneath the pool. It was pretty neat. I was on swim team, so we got to check it out. It had a one-sided glass window, so you can watch people doing turns at the walls and watch the flipping technique. If I had a nickel for every time that a school had a secret former weapons range underground, I'd have 2 nickels, which admittedly isn't a lot, but it is weird that it happened twice. I work in IT at my old school district. All of the teachers are just as immature as the students they teach, and most of the nicer teachers turn out to be jerks to their coworkers and horrible to work with. Also, everything is political and cliquey. Same experience for the most part. I found out that the teachers who were nicer to the social misfits typically were the most decent human beings. The football coach, who I knew, had changed the culture of the team. They were the stereotypical football jocks prior to him. He was a great guy too, and he held his kids to a higher standard than any other kids. The ones who were the cool teachers were the ones who were absolutely terrible people. I also found out the principal I had was widely disliked by everyone. Oh yeah, and another bit of an eye-opener that nobody knows. The major, largest problem with public schools is terrible administration. The school board chooses the top leadership, leadership chooses the building admins, and the admins choose the teachers. The school board doesn't like to admit they've made a mistake, so getting rid of terrible district administration is difficult. Additionally, upper administration tends to be a political position, so the worst of these are the best at making the bored people happy via political means. At this point, the cascade downwards is obvious. Bad administrators won't stick their necks out for the good building admins or teachers, who will then leave. But then they also won't stick their necks out to fire bad building admin or teachers. So good teachers watch bad teachers run the school, it's all political again, and then they leave. The end result of voting in a bad board member can be a complete ruining of school culture within as short as 5 years. Meanwhile, the good people up and down the chain get out of education. Vote in your board elections and you know who you're voting for. It means the world to where you live. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? You should hear the way teachers talk about students. They're brutally honest in teachers' meetings. And in the halls after the students are gone while their custodian is walking by collecting their room's trash. I told one of them just the other day that, there's a reason why I do what I do instead of what you do. This is kind of related, I'd say. It's about my school rather than the specific teachers. My high school had a theatre and put on a huge production every year, along with smaller things like talent shows and such throughout it. There was a light and sound crew that was open to any student that worked on building the sets, alongside setting up lights and sound. I was on the crew for a while, and the leader was a teacher/director that I highly respect, but he was also super chill and a good judge of character, trusting us with keys and access to stuff that students would never see. One of my friends, who was a higher up in the crew, unlocked and took us through some tunnels underneath the school. I had no idea that they ran underneath around 75% of the school. Our high school was pretty large, we're talking like 1,000 people. You had to crouch to go through at some points, and there was even a trapdoor from them that was in a janitor's closet attached to a teacher's lounge. It's funny to think I've walked past the wall the closet was behind so many times and never knew that there was a trapdoor to underground tunnels that I never thought might be there. Oh boy, have I got a story. I worked in the same department as my old teacher, one of the people who made me want to be a teacher in the first place. It was pretty cool. One day we were at a bar, and he's telling me his biggest horror stories and mentions a girl that I knew from high school. Turns out she was doing things with other kids during class under the stairs. We only found out because she confessed to my co-teacher. Apparently some kids had not paid her, and she was really upset about the whole ordeal, and she thought my colleague would be the only one who might listen. He was shocked, to say the least. She was right, and he worked with the right counselors in the school to get her back on track and deal with some trauma. It never really spread around the school, and I walked with her when I graduated. It was another checkmark on the list of why I looked up to him as a teacher, though, and I try to be as open about listening to my students now. For some clarification, since I don't want him to come off as a jerk, this stemmed from me speaking to him about a student confessing to buying substances for their family. I was a new teacher, and I wasn't fond of having to be a mandatory reporter. His advice stemmed from this story about the student that he had had, and other horror stories. He gave them to me as an example that reporting to the right people can actually make someone better. He wasn't just bragging about somebody I might have known. A lot of students would pass just because we didn't want to deal with them anymore, or because their failure would hurt funding and we were pressured to overlook failure of certain students. I taught at a technical school for one semester. I was forced to quit when I refused to pass an obviously failing student. The school's director brought me into his office and specifically said that if the student didn't pass, they'd lose his tuition and I'd be fired if I didn't pass him. I walked out in disgust. I learned from another teacher who I met in the pub that my Year 9 chemistry teacher was basically a less interesting Walter White. This one comes from an old teacher of mine. Whilst in Year 10, my language teacher and a PE teacher were having a secret relationship, despite everyone knowing that they were both in relationships with other people. Whilst doing my teacher training at a different school, I saw her briefly in the staff room. Later, I caught up with someone else who'd worked there and said how I knew her. Found out that she actually married this PE teacher a couple of years before and was having an affair with another PE teacher in that school. Fast forward to going into my 3rd year of teaching, at the interview for the school which I currently work at now. Speaking to another guy at the interview, and he told me which school he was leaving, and it was my old secondary school. I asked him if he knew my old language teacher and the gossip of her, and he said he knew they weren't together anymore. The day goes on, I just finish having a tour of the school, walk into the staff room, and there she is, sat there on her laptop. Turns out she had also been recently employed there. Some PE teachers came in, also on their interviews, and she made a beeline for the young male who was clearly about to start teaching. I mean, She clearly has a type. Oh boy. For all of the things that school can teach one, perhaps learning from your past mistakes is one of those common sense things that a person just can't hammer into themselves with a curriculum. I worked at an after-school childcare centre at a Catholic school. This was in an affluent community around the time of the Catholic Church scandal in the early 2000s. I didn't realize how many complaints of misconduct the school received regularly. While I was a young student attending that school in the 90s, one of our priests just suddenly disappeared. We were told he moved to a church that needed him. I found out later he was dismissed when accusations of a sort rather prolific against the Catholic Church in the 2000s came up. But he wasn't removed from the priesthood. True to what I was told as a young student, he was just moved to another parish. No investigation was opened up against him. Nobody went to the police. I found out later when I was actually working there just how such a thing could happen. I was required to attend a seminar which outlined the behavioral and physical symptoms of inappropriate conduct and the methods to approach a child and ask them if they feel safe and free to be kids in their environment. So far, a pretty solid presentation, a lot of good points and valuable information. But of course, things go off the rails when I'm then instructed that it's church policy that we relegate all accusations and red flags to a designated 1-800 phone number that's managed by the Los Angeles Archdiocese. Note that this is the archdiocese managed by the only man I'll ever punch in the face if I meet him in person, Cardinal Roger the Creep Peddler Mahoney. Seriously, I'll very happily mess him up. He shouldn't be retiring comfortably in an affluent mansion in Santa Barbara. He should be living the rest of his undeserved life eroding away in a jail cell. I'm disgusted just thinking that in high school, this is the same man who laid hands upon my shoulder during my confirmation ceremony and welcomed me to the church. Because it turns out, at the same time he rested his hand on my shoulder, he was operating a massive cover-up operation. He was constantly transferring priests to different parishes the moment accusations would be made against them, making it almost impossible for a proper follow-through with the victims. So these priests would always be put into a new community with new victims, none the wiser to them. And the seminar that I was attending was requiring me to be instrumental to Mahoney's cover-up. They wanted me to direct victims and their families to a 1-800 prayer line where they'd be gaslit into not calling the authorities, where they'd be assured they'll be taken care of immediately while the church actually does absolutely nothing. I spoke up about it to my co-workers, saying I refused to give victims the church-sanctioned pamphlet with the 1-800 number, saying I'd go to the police instead. My supervisor responded by telling the program director what I said, and I was blindsided with a one-on-one meeting with the director where I was derided for refusing to comply. She said to me, "Do you not take these things seriously?" That always stuck out to me, because at the time I was just a young college student with very little experience in handling adversity or getting vociferously reprimanded by my boss's boss. I should have replied with the obvious, "Yes, I do. The problem is you guys frickin' don't." But nah, I was young and just wanted to keep my job there. Which didn't help anyway because my hours were cut significantly under the pretense that I was a liability and needed to work the same hours as my supervisor, meaning all the days my supervisor had off and the last hour after she left were pulled from my schedule. It gave me a sense of validation and, yeah, I'll admit, a bit of smug satisfaction seeing the Los Angeles Archdiocese get absolutely frickin' obliterated in a class action civil suit. It put all of their wrongdoings into legal documentation, it absolved me of any guilt in not being more forthcoming about this policy to authorities, and it forced Roger Mahoney out of a position to continue circulating about his ring of awful priests and their despicable crimes. Albeit it didn't force him into a federal penitentiary, but considering how crappy the whole thing is, I'll take what I can get. I was a private school teacher at a school I attended as a student. The school had no infrastructure for special education or IEP students. They basically told parents they could send students there, but they're not getting any additional accommodation. I never connected or understood this as a kid, but every time we'd get a different student, they rarely lasted more than a year at the school. I found out over a decade after being at a school that there was a secret shelter under the school property that you could access through a creepy dark tunnel under the stage in the theater. It was set up like a little lounge and only the most artsy of students ever got to go in there. Also, my history and law teacher took pretty much every female teacher in that school to Pound Town. I'm a student teacher, but not at the school I attended. However, I'm teaching in an area that I'm very familiar with. I find out a lot of sad things about students, stuff like who's got mental health issues, who's being bullied, and who's a 504/IEP. I also find out who all the teachers hate in their team. I never really paid attention to any of that when I was in school, and I lived in a privileged area. This experience is seriously eye-opening. I also learned that a lot of teachers don't follow the law when it comes to grades and deadlines. Adults aren't that different from children. What secret treasure did you uncover when you first moved into a new place? My house has a 2-person jacuzzi tub with mirrors on 3 walls around it. When I was looking at the house, there was a 4-poster canopy bed with a mirror inside the canopy. Needless to say, the previous owner had his thing. When I was moving in, I found a basement with a bar with cuffs on either end hanging from the ceiling and 2 eye bolts in a board on the floor that would have made this a perfect place to tie someone up for some more alternative fun. I strongly suspect that this is what it was used for. I have a room that used to be a bar. The previous owner took the bar itself with him despite it being built in. It has a dropped ceiling, and the lights are above with clear panels to let the light through. I was moving ceiling tiles to change a bulb, and I got hit in the face by what I'm guessing was a homemade adult bedroom swing that was bolted to the rafters above. I've been in this house 15 years, and I still occasionally find a secret panel in a wall. It seems anywhere there was an extra bit of space, he put a removable panel to make hidden storage space. And despite all that, the single most surprising thing that I found in this house is the light switch in the bathroom that has power going to it, but doesn't seem to actually switch anything in the house on. What do, you mysterious switch? When will you stop taunting me and give up your secrets? I bet it turns the TV on and off at the neighbor's apartment. Not my house, but the school my friend worked at. A pipe had leaked and ruined a wall in a building, one of the oldest schools in the city. It was a beautiful property. Anyway, the pipe leaked, so they pulled down the ruined wall, and behind the wall they found a door. A fully furnished apartment was in there. It had a coal-burning stove to heat it, early 1900s appliances and decor. It was for the caretaker of the school. We have this side room next to some stairs. While we were moving stuff into the room, we noticed a piece of drywall was coming off the wall, so we took it off. Behind it and under the stair were some way old toys, most likely from the 50s. In the same house, about a year later, we paid a company to come put new insulation in the attic. When he was done, he told me we had a portion of our attic sealed off. So, we busted through, found a super old sewing table and about 15 boxes of pine cones. My husband had a car that he bought off a friend. He had it for 4 years and the driver's side window started messing up and getting off track, so he popped the frame off it to fix it. In the door frame, we found a gat and 2 clips wrapped in a white t-shirt. We called the friend he bought it from, and it turns out the car was sold to her from a police auction. I mean, that's not an accessible place, so it's not like it was for emergencies. So was this a murder weapon or a really long-term security plan? Did you get a prepper's car? There's so many potential explanations now I think of it. An old friend of mine grew up in the house that I now own. I had no idea, but he struggled with severe mental illness from around high school onwards. His mum left a few boxes behind in the garage, and one of them was full of his old arrest information. Letters from his parole officer, and most depressingly, a letter from the judge recommending he be remanded to a psychiatric facility instead of prison. Apparently, he lived his adult years in a home for schizophrenics and died a few years ago. The whole thing was just very sad. Newspapers from World War II. A cardboard box with a special gag and handcuffs. This was after they'd sent a message through the realtor asking if I'd found a digital camera. I had not, but I'd be kind of curious or afraid to look at what was on it. Moved into an old house in Berkshire in the UK and found a Bible from the 1700s in the attic. In the back was handwritten the history of the early owners. The church in the village was 12th century and had all the records, so we tracked down the modern descendants and gave them the Bible. The couple were pretty much speechless when we gave it to them. The dates in the Bible started around 1750, so it was nearly 220 years old at the time that we found it. We found the family in the same village. I grew up in the middle of nowhere, southern Idaho. The farm my folks rented was very odd. There was a ton of old farm equipment from the 40s and 50s, as well as several, about 10, old 50s cars just scattered around the property and hidden in the tree line. The owner had a small shed on the property she asked us to never open. No worries, it sat between the garage and an old mobile home trailer that was never used. We moved away, and shortly after the owner died. New property owners went to the shed, found tons of old World War II and older equipment. Guns, bayonets, a Third Reich flag, all sorts of stuff. This shed even had an old-school dirt wall basement that had old radios and tons of other crazy stuff. Unfortunately, after the new owners started messing with the shed, the basement, being dirt and all, eventually gave way and a lot of stuff was damaged. They were able to salvage a lot and sold it all, so it worked out. The most I ever found was a previous tenant's adult magazine stash as a teenager in the old trailer. Best find ever. Hanging on the wall in the unfinished, closed-off part of the attic, we found a matted portrait of a man staring angelically off into space as he cradled a deer. Upon closer inspection, we realized that the man had an arrow through his hand where it lay over the deer, having protected it from injury. We call him Deer Man. My parents bought a home that used to be a funeral parlor almost 100 years ago. Dad had never questioned why there was a second bulkhead that went nowhere, and when there was a bust pipe, they finally had to cut it open. Inside, we found a small, walled-off room that had hundreds of old bottles, odd equipment, chemicals and perfumed salts, stained glass windows from the original building, and a few old ledgers and accounting books. My parents had no use for it, and the local antique shop owner and town historian happily took it when offered. We'd received some cool old copies of photos of how the house originally looked a few years later. After moving into our new house, we found around 14 grand behind the toilet. Apparently the person who lived in the house before us didn't believe in banks. I had a friend who found $200K cash in a paper bag in a bedroom closet in a rental in Shippen, Cove area of Stamford, Connecticut. They turned it into the cops and had to make a list of people they'd told in case that person came forward lying to say it was theirs. After a certain amount of time it was theirs, net of taxes, of course. An uncomfortably obvious crystal lab and a secret passageway. The walls had been gutted, leading from a bedroom closet to a linen closet close to the back door. Also in the same house, buried in a pile of crap, an antique piano from the early 1900s. Had it been kept in better condition, we were told it would have been worth at least 10 grand because that particular model was so rare. My mum bought her house 12 years ago, but last year my mentally unstable brother kicked the front door down. The door had a giant metal lock on it. It didn't work, we just used the deadbolt, but kept the lock on because the house was built in 1795 and looked cool. The lock broke off and a bunch of little papers and cards fell out of it. Among them were CIA ID badges, business cards that had to do with cryptography, and other things that had to do with the CIA. A few days later I thought I'd look through the house in search of more CIA stuff and stumbled upon a World War II explosive round under one of the floorboards in the attic. That week was wild. The strangest thing we ever found was this really long, as in over a foot long, metal screw thing that was being used to hold the windows closed. We still have no idea what it could be used for. On the other hand, we buried all of our pets in the backyard, so the next person to move in has a bunch of tiny animal skeletons to discover when they start planting new trees or something. Earlier this year, I moved into a new apartment and found 4 unopened cans of 7-Up Gold in a gap between my kitchen cabinets and the wall. 7-Up Gold was discontinued in 1988. The seals on the cans had obviously failed long ago, and all of the liquid had evaporated or leaked out. There was about a quarter of a can left in one, but again, the seal was compromised and it was probably full of bacteria, so it wouldn't have been even remotely safe to drink. Razor blades. The double-edged ones from the old razors. They were in the wall when we opened it up to repair a busted pipe. I noticed a pile of debris in the wall and luckily happened to be wearing gloves. I reached in to grab the debris and throw it away and pulled out a handful of blades. There were several handfuls. I later learned a feature of mid-century modern bathrooms was a blade disposal slot in the back of the medicine cabinet. Super gross and creepy. Also, if you're going to move a bathroom wall in an MCM house, be on the lookout. A shotty and a Mary J grinder in the drop tile ceiling of the basement. Once again, this feels like a prepper thing. Worse ways to ride out the apocalypse than blasting out pellets while hopped up on the good herb, I guess. A box containing a ticket to the 1934 World Fair in Chicago. I'm not very tall. I was cleaning out my bathroom while preparing to move out of the house my family had rented for about 3 years. At the top of the closet, right at the back, were a balled-up pair of a stranger's used underwear that had apparently been there for at least 3 years that we'd lived there. That was gross. Found a full box of random crap in our basement of our apartment. Inside there was an Alcoholics Anonymous book filled with handwritten notes that progressively got less and less legible. Phone numbers, names, stories. We tried calling a few numbers and nobody answered. I think the woman died from her struggles. The previous owner's wife had passed away not long before we purchased the house. About a week after we took possession, the realtor called us and asked if we had found the owner's wife's wedding ring in the master bedroom closet. We had not. A few years later, we were cleaning on top of the kitchen cabinets and found the ring. Why it was on top of one of the kitchen cabinets, we'll never know. We were able to track down the owner and return it, however. We found a stack of acrylic paintings in the basement, all very amateurish. Subjects ranged from creepy little girls to 70s psychedelic undressed ladies. Realtor told the owners to pick them up or they'd end up in the trash. They showed up a year later asking for them. Bonus, junk removal guy loved the 70s undressed pictures and asked to keep them. We rented this one, didn't buy. Moved in and found a large sign in the rafters of the garage that had the words, Crystal House. It certainly helped connect the dots with everything else wrong with the place. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. We didn't realize it while touring and doing our walkthrough, but all of the bedroom locks were from the outside. Every bedroom had a medicine cabinet as well. Oh, our house had that as well, sort of. 2 ground floor bedrooms could be locked from the outside and not unlocked in any way from inside the bedrooms. One bedroom had French doors leading to the yard, and one had a very large window that could be easily used as an entrance or exit, so it's not like they were interested in keeping people locked inside the rooms. More like, once there was someone inside of the rooms, they couldn't get into the rest of the house. The bedrooms also had motion detectors wired into the electrical systems that would set off an alarm. The disarm panel was by the front door. At the back of the drawer in the kitchen, we also found a copy of a restraining order against a family member that had required that person to relinquish all firearms. I have to assume these things were all related. Not a house, but a car. Bought home a used 2000 Explorer with a couple thousand miles on it. Saw a piece of paper behind the plastic of the glove compartment, back where the light bulb is. I carefully pulled it out. It's a white envelope. Inside is roughly $1,000 in various bills. We called the dealership to ask them what to do, but for some reason they either could not contact the seller of the vehicle or the seller of the vehicle refused to be contacted. I wanted to turn it in because $1,000 really frickin' helped me out. I'd be financially devastated if I lost that much. That was a good year. Huh. My kids found a crawl space up in my bedroom. They found Ken dolls with their hands melted and razors embedded. I did my best to lighten the freakishness and joked that Sid from Toy Story must have lived there. Change. So much change. Countless pennies, nickels, and dimes, with the occasional quarter sprinkled in. All in the ground around the house. To clarify, it was all coins from recent years, 60s, 70s, 80s, and so on. My family bought the house from a sweet couple who had a lot of foster children coming in and out of their home. We found toys, knives, contraceptives, and so much more in and around the house. Anytime we dug around the house, we knew we were going to find something odd. Maybe it was a house my husband lived in. It was like living with Sonic the Hedgehog. Coins bursting everywhere. A .38 revolver hidden in a closet. Had a police officer friend run the serial number. Turns out it was stolen in a home burglary in 1973. We found it in 1998. We bought our house in September last year. About this time last year, our cat started playing with this little wooden thing that he'd found. We had no idea what he was playing with, but when we walked over to see what it was, it turned out to be a little dreidel. We'd never seen it before, but that's when our cat let us know that he was Jewish. A colorized, as in the colors were filled in by hand, very large black and white photograph in an ornate gilded frame found in the attic. The photo showed a young child in a white lacy dress wearing a cowboy hat and boots, standing on the steps of a city building, think brownstone, with a pony. The house was in the Midwest and not near a city where such buildings might be found. It was an old photo, and you couldn't tell if this was a girl or a boy, since boys used to wear dresses. But what you could tell, and could not be denied, was that the child was the ugliest child any of us had ever seen. Scary ugly. I wasn't even envious about the pony. That kid was just so ugly. We hung the photo in a prominent spot and we'd make up a story about the person and pony photo, taking turns. We left that thing in the attic when we sold the house. It didn't seem right to take it. When I was mad at my parents, I knew that I'd forgive them and forget why I was ever mad in the first place. So in my anger, I conceived this plan to write down why they made me mad on a tiny piece of paper and hide it so I could rediscover it someday. I hid these little reminders in the wooden slats of my closet door. I'd stuff them in the little cracks of the baseboard, in between any chipping or peeling paint and the wall, and I never really discovered any of them. Whatever poor soul that bought the house after I graduated high school got to discover all the causes of my teenage angst. We bought a lovely but run-down old Victorian house. On the 3rd floor, the attic that we turned into an actual living space, there was "Kill You" written in crayon on the wall. It also had a secret stairway to the attic in the closet of one of the bedrooms. This was something we discovered ourselves when renovating it. We found the down staircase and then followed it to the nailed-shut door inside the closet. Very cool house, but in a crappy neighborhood. We eventually moved. There was no sign of hauntings. You know, you could have at least decorated that attic full of creepy memorabilia, placed a spooky-looking doll in a chalk pentagram, nailed the other door shut, and just left this as a story for someone else to write in the future. You missed an opportunity there. When my parents bought our house, they found old crates for oranges from 1957 in our basement. They bought the house in 2000. I've still got the crates. 10 years I've lived in my house, but until recently I'd never been in the attic. It had a push-up hatch, rather than a pull-down or ladder combo, so it wasn't very accessible. There was a weird smell one day and I was afraid something might have passed away up there, so I pulled out a ladder, lifted the hatch, and poked my head up there to check it out. Right next to the hatch in the attic was a huge pile of what looked like stuffing, but it turned out to be a gigantic, as in 6 or 7 foot, stuffed person. Like the biggest voodoo doll that there ever was, but all white. I tried moving it around a bit to get it out of the way, because it was insanely heavy and hard to move. It was torn in places and full of 100 years of dust, stuffing, and whatever the heck else, so yeah. I just left it in there, closed the hatch, and called it a day. The attic was full of doll heads. I left them in there for the next owner. My cousin found an honest-to-gosh hidden room. A bookshelf swung forward and revealed an unfinished place under the stairs. It had a water glass and some Star Wars books from 1996 in it. My friend's dad found an urn full of ashes in the basement of their house. The urn had a plaque on it with the word "baby" and an angel. The previous owner had left the urn there with the ashes of their young one. My friend's dad displayed the urn in their living room. They eventually sold the house and moved away, but her dad took the urn. He displays it on his mantel. I can't find a picture right now, but there was a small cardboard box with several dozen headshots clipped from a very old newspaper in the rafters of my 1915 home. They were all the same photo of a young woman from the neck up, about 2 inches square. Several were pasted into a little leather book on each page. Also, a spoon with what was probably smack residue and Q-tips in an old dresser. Also, what was probably a small crystal lab in the basement with mirrors and holes strategically placed to make it easier to see if someone entered the house. Also, 15 disgusting mattresses that I had to dispose of. I bought a smack house. A child-sized WWE belt. Despite purchasing my first home and now being several years' worth of salary in debt for the first time, I was most interested in how I could possibly wear such a fine article of clothing to work the next day. You should have hung it over your shoulder and walked through the office. Instant respect. They'll know not to let their kids mess with you. When I lived in a townhouse a few years ago, my roommate and I noticed a message scratched into the side of the refrigerator. Find the X. We searched that place high and low and never found an X. I really hope it was someone messing with us, because if I moved out and never found the buried treasure, I'm going to be so mad. A USB drive belonging to the previous owner. It held 30 photos of his car and one of his wife and baby. Unexploded World War II parachute bomb. Had to have the bomb squad come out and collect it. There was a kitchen hidden behind a wall, fully furnished, with a dead mouse under the table that was practically mummified. A mostly full bottle of old toothache drops that have chloroform in them. For me, it was between a sign found on the basement ceiling that simply said, "Do not hump," and the crib in the attic with the dead baby mouse in it. When I was young and we were moving, I didn't feel like cleaning my room, so I stuffed a bunch of knickknacks and some mildly dirty underwear into a hole in the wall before we patched it up. I hope someone finds my treasure one day. We found a small wooden box filled with black and white photos. The photos were of the previous owners along with another couple in various states of undress and compromising positions. The box also contained a couple of teeth. That was a strange day. A soldier's pocket Bible from 1863, mint condition, gold-leafed, with an inscription from his sister. I assume it was a soldier's Bible, as another pass has Fort Ganley, VA, written on it. It was found resting on the beam on an open wall of a garage in the year 1976. It was given to me as a kid, and I put it in a box and kept it with my other real treasures. I found a VHS tape from a defunct rental store in the basement. Somebody stashed it away by the wood boards of the ceiling and left it there after moving. Part of me felt I was about to get cursed from the Ring ghost, but popped it into the old VCR anyways. I started it at a halfway point and found some crazy 80s adult movie. Couldn't stop laughing at the absurdity of it. I also found, next to the tape, an old schematic map of the house before some of the additions. Interesting, but I feel it's more of a usual thing to find in a house. I was taking down some old ceiling tiles in my basement one fine summer day. Things were going surprisingly well. No bugs, mice, or asbestos, until I shifted the tile that's directly above the boiler. I saw something rolling off the tile and felt it hit my shoulder. I looked down, and in a small pile of dust and paper debris was a wooden marital aid. A sizable and clearly used wooden marital aid. Now, I was still holding the tile above my head and realized that it was heavier than what the last few had been. Great. I definitely wasn't expecting a fleet enema, old and yellowed contraceptives, or the mice nest made with shredded adult magazines that was containing all the previously mentioned items. It was like I was holding a platter of nightmares. The next tile held far more books and magazines. I called the police once I found some illegal, unsafe for YouTube material. They ended up taking away a whole box of books, magazines, film negatives, and loose photos. They did leave me with the wooden toy though. Mercy. That basement still gives me the creeps sometimes. What were the most surprising things for deaf people who gained hearing later on in life? My cousin was born deaf and went through an operation to recover part of his hearing when he was 12. He sometimes uses hearing aids, but he can get by without them in general. His family had a bunny, Tupu. Of course, he'd learned about cows mooing, cats meowing, all the usual farmyard animals before he'd had his surgery. He was very shocked when he came home and greeted his bunny that it made no sound. It took the longest time for him to understand that bunnies are pretty quiet animals in general. He explained that he thought all pets were loud. My old roommate in New York City got implants at, I think he was 25 or 26. He was shocked that the radiators in the house didn't make noise. He could feel them and was absolutely sure, given their shaking and vibrating from time to time, that they were going to be quite noisy. On the flip side, he was deeply annoyed by the buzz of fluorescent lighting, which he did not expect to make that much noise. I had a child friend that gained hearing, and she didn't realize you could control the volume of your voice. So when I whispered to her, she said, "Hang on, I think I need to adjust my hearing aid." At first I just thought, oh, it mustn't be working, until I realized what was going on. She whispered to me for about 2 weeks solid just to practice. Yes, she also practiced shouting, but we did that in secluded woodlands. My friend got his hearing at age 6. He swears to this day that he thought flowers would make some sort of noise, and that's what attracted bees. Nernroot makes a sound to attract adventurers, actually. I went deaf due to illness, probably around the age of 4 months. Got my hearing back at around 8 years old through surgery. I used to think traffic lights should make a noise. Street signs too. Like when a stop sign has a blinking light for added visibility, I think that's actually where I got the idea in my head. They're trying to get your attention, right? So of course they must put sirens in all the traffic lights. My mum says I used to hold my ears when we'd drive through an intersection, though I don't remember that part. I've been wondering if when all of these people get their hearing, whether it's as sensitive as a child's or maybe kind of dulled because of the surgical nature of the correction. The fact that some of these people seem quite distressed by sirens or fluorescent lights suggests the former. Well, after my cochlear implant, I started hearing a lot of things that I never knew existed. But here are a few things that I thought would make a noise, but they didn't. First, I expected the light bulbs to hiss or a flickering sound when you turn them on, and I was so disappointed. Second, I thought you could hear your eyes close, like a blink, but there's no sound when you close your eyelids. There's no whoosh. Third, you know how wind makes a noise going through trees? I thought it would make more noises going through hair. Nope. Fourth, now I could hear soft sounds, but I still get spooked when I see a bug crawling and I don't hear it. They don't make a noise at all. And finally, going number 2 does not make a sound, only the splash into the toilet. I thought the body makes a noise to push it out. I was disappointed. I got waterproof hearing aids. Taking a shower scared the ever-loving Christ out of me. I have a cochlear implant on one side, hearing aid on the other. I don't use waterproof unless I go swimming. One time after swimming, I decided to keep them on when I was showering, and I got shivers down my spine. My daughter suffered from recurring ear infections that went on for over a year before I could get the doctors to push for tubes in her ears. I felt that she was either unable to hear that, or it was very muffled. The doctor that placed the tubes confirmed my suspicions, stating that she most likely heard noise as though she was underwater. I cannot attest to what exactly she expected to make a noise, but I still tear up when I think about her face as she re-explored the entire house with renewed fascination. I can, however, give my subjective opinion based on her facial expressions. The thing that sticks out the most is the refrigerator. She was in awe over the humming noise that thing makes, a noise that we often tune out because we're so accustomed to it, right? As she focused on that appliance for a bit, she made her way around to everything else that was large and stood in front of it as if she was expecting everything to have its own secret noise. I can't say for sure, but the amount of time that she stayed with her face pressed up against the inactive washing machine and dryer leads me to believe with almost certainty that she was expecting those to hum and whir as well. At her age, you wouldn't expect her to make a correlation between similarly sized appliances, but I'll be damned if it didn't appear that way. I had a friend who was born deaf but got hearing aids. She always thought people yawning was people randomly screaming, so it always confused her why people would be screaming in the library, movies, at church, and in public. She never asked why people were screaming because she thought it was normal. After she got the hearing aid, she thought she'd be hearing people scream when they yawned. A former coworker went to RIT, where they've got a school for the deaf. In the summertime, hearing all of the deaf students loudly doing the deed with the windows open because they don't realize how loud they are was one of the funniest things going on there, according to him. My coworker and her husband are both deaf, but none of her 4 kids are. I can only imagine the noises those kids hear. I have friends that go to RIT, and I used to visit them regularly. Can confirm, the deaf kids are real loud. Candles or fire? I regained my hearing at the age of 2, so I was absolutely heartbroken when I discovered that birthday candles did not make any sounds while burning. Also, I expected flashing lights to make some sort of noise. Not really sure what I expected exactly, but maybe like a siren or a loud bang. I couldn't hear until I was about 4 years old. I remember being surprised that trains were relatively quiet for their size. Question: if you lose your hearing, can you still have tinnitus? That would be a nightmare to have ringing in your ear without any other sound to mitigate it. Okay, a quick Google search has brought up, being hearing impaired doesn't exempt you from these kinds of sounds, unfortunately. Deaf people are more likely to have tinnitus, in fact. It's thought to be linked to the damage that caused the deafness itself. I got my hearing at 7, and I thought that grass would make a squeaky noise when you stepped on it. I was a weird kid. My dad progressively went deafer as his life went on, and was almost 100% deaf by around age 20. He got a cochlear implant when I was around 7 years old, put them in, asked my mum, "Are the kids always this damn loud?" and proceeded to take the cochlear implant off so he didn't have to listen to my little brother and I yelling. I always thought that was funny. I was born with tons of fluid in my ears and only had very slight hearing at best. When I was 6 months old, I had a surgery that put tubes in my ears to drain said fluid. My mum says that when I came home from surgery, I went to my toy box and shook every toy in it to see what sounds they made. Honestly, it wasn't that serious, but it did lead to some auditory processing issues, and I had to see a speech therapist until I was 7. Crazy what a difference 6 months of hearing makes that early on. My 3-year-old son is deaf, and we just had a visit this morning from his signing teacher, who's also deaf herself. She recently had cochlear implants fitted, and while we were talking and signing, she said, I'm sorry, I can't concentrate. I can hear a horrible constant noise. It's not stopped the whole time I've been here. Turns out it was the rain on my conservatory roof. Okay, this is furthering the idea that when people get their hearing back, they get complete spidey sense. Although on reflection, I'm sure depending on the procedure and whether they had hearing beforehand, there's a large degree of difference. Not me, but when I was in high school, a bunch of kids would meet in a nearby no man's land and hang out before school started. I spent most of my mornings loudly talking to my almost deaf friend. One day he showed up and said he had a new hearing aid. I didn't have to yell at him to get him to hear me anymore. Yay! A few minutes later, he asked what that noise was. I asked which noise, listening and hearing nothing out of the ordinary. I don't know, it's like a weird beeping, almost musical. Really bizarre, but actually kind of pleasing. Took me a minute to realize that my man was hearing bird song for the first time in his life. That was a pretty cool moment. My dad was born with severe hearing loss, but it wasn't detected until he was 50. His parents just thought he was ignorant if he didn't answer them. It's quite sad, actually. His parents definitely failed him. He's also dyslexic, and it's affected every part of his life and self-worth. Anywho, my mum told him he needed a hearing test because the TV was starting to deafen her. She thought, oh, it's just years of loud music and using a shotgun occasionally. So he has this hearing test and some other tests and gets told he's actually born deaf in one ear and has significant loss in the other. He can't hear phonics. You can imagine his problems through life. He finally gets hearing aids, and the first day he sits down and eats a packet of crisps, and he absolutely flips out. What the F is that noise? Holy crap, my head is exploding. We had to explain that you can hear the crunching of food and stuff, and some foods are louder than others. It was heartbreaking to see what he's missed out on. Now he only uses his hearing aids after a good nag from my mum. We still have to put up with his noisy eating, but he's back to ignorance is bliss. My godfather and dad's lifelong best friend. He was born with hearing, but lost it before age 2 due to some health issues. Went his entire childhood deaf, and in his 20s he finally got a hearing aid. At the time, he and his wife were living in the downtown of a large city. Apparently, he had it about 2 weeks before he threw it out, saying everything was too loud, he hated the noise and sound, and that things were more peaceful without it. 15 years later, he moved out into the country on a few hundred acres of wood. Still, he refused to wear a hearing aid and kept refusing for the next 10 years. Finally, his wife convinced him to give it a try, and his mind was blown. He couldn't believe how quiet everything was and how much he enjoyed hearing. He finally explained that he thought the noise of the traffic downtown was the wind and that it would sound like that everywhere all the time. So for more than 25 years, he thought wind sounded like hundreds of cars driving by. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My girlfriend is not deaf, but she is hard of hearing, which for her means that she can't hear high-frequency sounds. She recently got hearing aids that amplify the frequencies that she can't hear, and was shocked to find out that birds and crickets chirp, to the point that she thought the birds were trying to attack her and was horrified that we were surrounded by millions of bugs when I explained what the crickets were. It just goes to show what peace of mind one could obtain from not hearing, and how deaf or hard of hearing people interpret the world completely differently than people who hear normally do. These comments have been super interesting. I never thought about this before. I hope your girlfriend's been able to put her mind at rest about the birds and crickets. One of my newly hearing-enabled friends basically said, "How the frick do you normies stand all of this noise?" I swear I've read somewhere that most people expect the sun to make noise, but for the life of me I can't seem to remember where. I mean, if Teletubbies is to be believed, it makes the sound of a laughing baby. I thought it would make a sizzling sound. It's a giant ball of fire. It's hard not to think it makes any noise at all. I was deaf for a very long amount of time, but when I got some machine to fix it, I don't know what it's called, I was just very annoyed by everything. The things I least expected to make noise were just walking and water flowing. One of my close friends in high school has a younger sister who used to be deaf before she got cochlear implants. We were watching a silent movie for a film class, and her younger sister thought that all of those movies made noise. She ran out thinking she was deaf again. We watched it at her home for an assignment. We were pretty quiet. The younger sister just panicked to see a movie playing and no noise because her experience is that movies are real loud. Only realized that she could still hear after she heard the door close. I can't remember what I expected to make noise, but first time I had hearing aids, I found out scratching my skin, brushing my hair, and opening the door made noises. I got freaked out by birds as well. Kitchens are real noisy. I remember trying to figure out a bizarre sound to be described, and it was just bubbling water. Oh, and when people smile, it makes a noise I can only describe as a click as the lips brush against the teeth. It took me 6 years to figure out what it was whilst going from straight-faced to smiling in the mirror with hearing aids on. Open-mouthed smile only. My friends and colleagues love that I can hear them smiling without looking at them now. I was born with impaired hearing, but had an operation to fix it when I was very young. My dad loves to tell the story of me coming home for the first time with clear hearing. I get home, go to the bathroom, do my thing and flush. Except I'd never heard a toilet flush before. I bolted out of there in tears, screaming for my parents because I couldn't handle the shock that the toilet makes that much noise. I had a cousin who was born deaf and got her hearing fixed at the age of 9. I don't know how, but surgery, I think. They didn't realize that everything made noises. Wind, water, breathing, chewing, and they were annoyed for a few weeks, but then got used to it. My son got hearing aids just about 6 months ago. He had mid-range hearing loss at about 50% total loss. He was shocked at how much noise rain makes. He was also surprised to learn that when he rubs his hand across fabric or leather seats or clothes, that it makes a noise. The poor kid, he had to discover background noise at 12 and then go through the process of making it background noise. The biggest change for him was learning that people have different voices. He could generally tell male from female, but he said that basically all women sounded the same and men all sounded the same as well. I guess vocal timbre was completely absorbed by his hearing loss. Chewing and chomping food, the most annoying noise ever. I had no clue people could make so much noise while eating. Some of them more than others. It still blows my mind how many grown adults make Homer Simpson-like eating noises. But due to the super sensitive hearing factor we've chatted about earlier, I wonder if newly hearing-enabled folks basically find everyone's eating noises repulsive. I thought my member would make a squirting sound when I peed, and I didn't expect just to have a splashing sound instead when I got my hearing back at age 6. Farting became one of my favorite things, and I understood why people would frown at me when I did it. I am profoundly deaf. Born deaf with no residual hearing whatsoever. I had hearing aids that amplified sounds by 140 decibels, and even if I stood next to a jet engine, I wouldn't hear a thing, though I'd feel all of the vibrations. I got a cochlear implant back in 1994 when I was 14. I'm 39 now, so that's 25 years ago. I can hear absolutely anything. If I turned my processor's sensitivity up to maximum, I'd hear my heart beating and breathing. I had problems with hearing fluorescent tubes buzzing loudly when my audiology discovered they made a mistake with the sensitivity levels. Despite being able to hear anything, I can't understand speech at all unless I can lip-read the speaker, where I can understand 50 to 75% of people's speech, as opposed to less than 5% without the processor on. Then there were the surprising things. I'm used to sounds now, but after my big switch on, I was surprised by a range of sounds like the kettle boiling, microwave beeping, the keyboard clicking, things like that. I was most surprised by the noise of indicators in cars. The ticking noise by the indicator was the most surprising. What confused me the most, though, was when I heard this tick-tocking noise, then a quiet roar, then silence, and then the tick-tock would slowly start up again, get a bit more rapid, then the quiet roar, and the cycle would repeat itself several times. I got confused and asked my mum. She laughed and said the tennis was on the TV in the bedroom next door. The quiet roar was the clapping by the spectators. I once read about a deaf guy who expected the sun to be very loud, and he never imagined that showers were that loud either. My friend was not born deaf, but lost his hearing due to a lifetime of loud, heavy equipment use. He was in his 60s when he finally relented and got himself a hearing aid. He stopped by my office to exclaim how much better life was since receiving the device. "I can hear the breeze and the birds again," he says. "Rain, water trickling in brooks, it's all back. I feel like a young man again. There's so much detail to sound that I'd forgotten all about." "That's wonderful," I exclaim. "What kind is it?" He looks at his watch and says, about 3:45. I wasn't born deaf, but developed chronic ear infections in my left ear around 6 months of age, and as a result, my eardrum and bones of hearing were completely destroyed, and left me almost completely deaf in my left ear by the time I was 5 to 6. As a result, I never really got to know what it was like to hear in stereo. At the age of 28, I had a surgery that was able to replace the bones of hearing with a single titanium piece and rebuild an eardrum. I was told it would take 6 months for my brain to relearn how to interpret the audio signal. But when I woke from surgery, I was instantly assaulted by what felt like a wall of sound. It was quite painful. At the time, I had 3 kids, ages 8, 5, and 3. One of the biggest shocks to me was the sheer volume of noise that my children could make. The first day we were home, I turned to my husband and asked, "Have our kids always been this loud?" The other biggest shock was surround sound. A year or so before my surgery, my husband had gone out and spent a good sum of money on a surround sound system for our house. I was livid. What a waste of money. The first time we watched a movie in surround sound after my surgery, however, I was in awe. My husband just laughed at me as I kept turning from side to side, saying, "Did you hear that? Things are actually moving around the room." When the movie was finished, I sat in stunned silence for a moment before turning to him and saying, Oh, I get it. That was worth every penny. My professor, who is deaf, said that she came home one day from class and her roommate asked her if she was hungry. The professor said, "Yes, I'm starving. I haven't eaten all day, but how do you know?" The roommate explained that she could hear her stomach grumbling. My professor freaks out that her organs make noise and other people can hear inside her body. My class was dying from laughter. I was born with hearing, but I began losing it when I turned 1, and my parents didn't realize that I wasn't able to hear anymore. But when they finally figured out that I couldn't actually hear and got bilateral cochlear implants, I was very surprised to find out that bugs, like ants and spiders and the like, don't make noise. I always just assumed that if you could feel something move, it had to make a noise. I was born deaf and got a cochlear implant when I was 27. I can hear better, but I rely on lip reading as well. I had no idea that going to the bathroom makes so much noise and that people could hear all kinds of embarrassing noises. It explains many weird looks I got before. I sometimes work with a guy with a deaf son who got a cochlear implant. He thought people were mispronouncing the word for because it didn't rhyme with hour. Even for a lifelong hearer, that's a good question. Was born with hearing loss. I'm in my mid-30s now and I recently got 2 hearing aids. I had no idea that the world was so loud. Apparently the elevators at work make a beeping sound when they arrive at their destination. And a loud one too. Papers make noise as well if you look through them. I had no idea. And when my cat parades around the house, I hear its nails on the wooden floor. Flushing a toilet is so loud, I'll take my aids out before I do it. I was born deaf but received an implant early, at 2.5 years old. I expect everything to make noises, but I didn't expect the night to be that creepy. I stayed up during the night to watch TV and, my god, too many different noises. I'm glad I can't hear during the night when I turn that thing off. I have a question for you non-deaf people. How do you sleep at night with all these noises? It must be scary as hell. Well, I'm only hearing impaired, but god damn the world is noisy. There's nothing better than coming home, taking out your hearing aids, and finally letting your brain relax. But the thing that surprised me the most was how loud toilet flushes are and damn crunchy leaves in the fall. When did you convince everyone that you were, in fact, an actual wizard? While standing directly in front of one of 5 elevators at work, I was asked, "What makes you think it's going to be that one?" To which I responded very seriously, "I always know." Right as the doors opened, and it made me look like some sort of Jedi. One time I had a girl in my car that I really liked and wanted to impress. Now this was in the late 1980s when CD players in cars were really new. I had a custom installation that worked pretty well, but it had some flaws. In particular, I had to hit the play button whenever I turned on the car. Then the amp wouldn't kick in for about 30 seconds for some reason. So I was in the habit of hitting the play button ASAP as I turned on the car so the tunes would start up. So we got in my car, a Mustang convertible at the time, and as usual I hit the play button as soon as I started the car. But having done this literally hundreds of times, I was very fast and fluid at it, and the girl didn't even notice that I'd done that. So we pull away, driving down the Pacific Coast Highway in Southern California along the ocean, as I recall. So the girl says, "Hey, how about some music?" I knew the amp was about to kick in, so without even glancing at her, I snapped my fingers in front of the CD player. And the timing was perfect. The music immediately started up. My expression never changed, like I expect magic things to happen at the snap of my fingers all the time. She just stared at the CD player, stared at me, and then just shook her head with a little laugh. I felt like the smoothest king of the smooth people. On the tennis court, I'm about 3 courts away from the basket of tennis balls when I take a ball out, say loudly to my friend, "And now I will take this ball and I will serve it into the basket." I toss the ball up and hit it in the general direction of the basket. That crap goes straight into the basket like a guided missile. The look on his face as I was elevated to godlike status was amazing. We were jumping around a little bit after that. Once I sneezed in class and the lights went out. I was whacking the old mule once and this happened right as I arrived at my destination. For this reason, I've refrained from having relations with any women due to the obvious might of my climaxes. At least, that's what I tell myself. Thank you for writing in, and thank you for your sacrifice. Your celibacy is the only thing standing between your city's power grid and complete destruction. I was sitting in my brother's apartment and this big fly came buzzing into the room. He said, "That frickin' fly has been driving me crazy for 2 days." Before he'd even finished saying it, I reached into the air and grabbed the fly. Then, without saying a word, walked over to the window and let it go outside, sat back down and continued the conversation. Cook dropped a plate of food and I managed to catch it before it hit the ground without a single piece of food falling from the plate. Graceful like a swan, motherfricker. Swans are loud, awkwardly long-necked honking beasts which reportedly taste delicious. I have never understood why they're the symbol of grace. When my son was about 8 years old, I Jedi mind-tricked him to sleep. It was about 2:30 in the morning and he was very angry and very tired. I said, "Noah, it's time you went to sleep," and I waved my hand in front of his face. As soon as my hand went over his face, he was asleep. It was amazing, but my wife didn't believe me when I told her the next morning. Sometimes I pick up the phone and fix problems instantly. For example, "Hello, CIT service desk, how can I help?" "Oh, hi, sorry, what's the issue?" "Oh, don't worry, it works." "Okay, thanks." I worked in an arcade for a while, and this effect was localized to one single game tech named Larry. When the machines would break down without explanation, we would all spend hours tweaking around with them. Sure enough, Larry would walk over and start it up without incident. Those machines would then be marked with an AOL sticker, standing for Afraid of Larry. I feel like this is going to be pretty common, but I always try to guess where the train doors are going to stop, or subway or similar railed vehicles. I'll pick a spot and stand next to the platform edge, and when the train comes whooshing up, everyone does that slow shuffle towards where it looks like the nearest door will stop. When it works, I end up with a sudden crowd around me and the center of the doors right in front of me, without moving a muscle. I mean, I doubt anyone notices or cares, but I take significant satisfaction in it. I was in 9th grade and I'd just gotten a digital watch. I spent an unhealthy amount of time making sure that my watch was perfectly synced to the school's clock, which was displayed on the classroom's television mounted in the corner. Since that clock didn't show the seconds, I'd sit there, watch in hand, waiting for the moment the minute number jumped forward. When it did, I would immediately alter the time on my watch as well. So one day during English class, we were talking about when we get out of class. I don't know why, but the discussion got kind of heated for such a stupid subject. One kid was adamantly insisting that we wouldn't get out for at least 2 minutes, but I know, from glancing at my watch, that we were going to get out in 12 seconds. I told him that and he just scoffed. So I started counting down. 5, he just laughed at me. 4, people stopped talking and looked at me. 3, students started rotating in their seats to look at the time. 2, I started to get nervous. What if I was wrong? 1, silence within the area we were sitting in, butterflies in my stomach, the kid's expression suddenly turning nervous. And then a half second after, I started panicking about being wrong and never living this down when the bell rang. I used to be a goalkeeper at high school. I'm from Brazil. Me and my fellow teammates, my friends, were joking and playing with the soccer balls before a match, and for some reason I was doing fake karate kung fu stances and moves. I was facing the goal. Most of my friends were behind the goal, and did a punch move only to repel an incoming ball my friend kicked to hit me in the back. It was pretty sweet. Whenever a new person gets into my car, at some point during the drive I'll start singing some random classic oldie song. Then I give my passenger the old, "Watch this" look, as I change the radio to the oldie station as if I knew the song I was singing would be playing. This has worked for me once in my entire life, and damn it did I feel like an absolute legend. The best one I've ever seen was done by my dad. Mum, Dad, and I were standing in the kitchen having a conversation. Dad casually reaches up and pulls a plate out of the cabinet, not in any hurry, turns to me, finishes a sentence, reaches out into midair over the toaster completely unprompted, toast pops up, Dad snatches the toast out of midair, takes the most satisfied bite I've ever seen and strolls off like a champ. And yeah, the most popular comment I'm getting is, "What toaster do you have that shoots toast up into midair?" This would have been in the mid-90s sometime. The toaster was an older model. The toast did not shoot into the air but did spring up suddenly. Toast can catch a little air this way, which is precisely what happened, and Dad had his hand over the toaster such that he caught it at the apogee of its path without needing to wait for it. Using the London Underground cards while they were hidden in my glove. You can tell when a red light is about to turn green by looking at the "Don't Walk" light lateral to it. It begins to flash right before the light changes. When I'd be at a red light when my kids were little, I'd hold out my hands and say, "Green," and it would turn. And they thought I was a god. And now they roll their eyes at me. I was walking through the 7-Eleven with my friends one day when for some reason a small package of food started to fall off the shelf next to us. Without thinking or turning my head, I instantly reached my hand out and the package landed perfectly in my hand. I am Spider-Man. I dodged a paintball once, Matrix style. I leant back as I saw it coming, and it flew gracefully over my head. Then I got shot in the family jewels. But for a third of a second, I was God. Kind of feels like the realistic outcome of what should have happened in The Matrix 2, to be honest. I mean, it wouldn't have been nearly as cool, but I would have died laughing in the cinema. That dumb agent just had to go for the thigh and get a gloat in. One of my friends had just started dating one of the cool car dudes at my high school. Me being more of a lame nerd girl, I had a bit of a hard time fitting in with this new crowd, especially since my knowledge of cars was very sparse. Well, one evening, as the big group of car dudes and a few of my girl buddies met up, I felt utterly misplaced. One of the boys started telling a tale of woe about a part of his engine, no idea which, so don't ask, that had gone missing, and judging by the solemn mood of his crew, it nearly felt like a relative had died. Suddenly, one of my friends pipes up, "Vira can find it. She does that. She's totally magic." All eyes on me. What she was speaking of was my little parlor trick and knack of guessing where people put their stuff based on what I know about them. Absolutely not magical, but a fun trick that I thought would stay between us girls only. I was probably 50 shades of whooped butt in the face when I figured out I should just go for it. Nothing could really go bad. They couldn't ignore me more than they already did. During the evening, I'd observed that this guy was clumsy, slightly dazed, and preoccupied. He'd dropped at least 3 things on the floor in just a couple of hours, and he'd forgotten to buy snacks, and he always asked, "Huh?" after someone spoke to him. So I said, "You tossed it out. In a garbage bag near where you work on your car," I said with more confidence than I felt. As it was his house, he left to go to the garage and came back holding a bag. A black garbage bag. And I'm not bullcrapping you, it was in there. The whole room oohed and awed, and no, I didn't get off with the hottest bloke there, nor suddenly become less nerdy. But after that, they didn't ignore me. To them, I was cool. And I didn't mind letting them think I was magic, because to be honest, I frickin' felt magic. In short, a story in which I Sherlock some cool car dudes. I went to instant message one of my friends and for some reason decided to start the conversation with, "That's what she said," completely out of the blue. Apparently he was typing a complaint about his work to me at the same time, so literally less than a second after I hit enter, my friend sent, "Man, this is so hard." For about 6 lines after that, I kept writing random lines and they all worked. It was something like, "That's what she said. Man, this is so hard. Because I'm a wizard. How did you do that? Creepily awesome. Okay, that's creepy. What the frick?" And then he logs off. It only ever happened once, but once was enough. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Once I was hanging out at a friend's house, imbibing substances and alcohol and enjoying the subtle nuance of Guitar Hero. A reasonable-sized group of us were there that night. I was wailing away to At the Drive-In's One-Armed Scissor. My friend Rocky was on bass. When I asked my twin sister, who was somewhere behind me, "What's the greatest thing in the world?" Cookies?" she responds. For a moment, I don't acknowledge what just happened until the solo came in. It's a rather simple solo, so I was able to rest my plucking hand and just tap that crap out. I didn't consider this some brave feat until Rocky looked at me with the respect eyes and expressed his envy and considerable impression. As I was tapping that solo out, my newly freed hand reaches into my pocket and pulls out its contents. As it happens, it's some small package of Oreo cookies. I throw this package behind my shoulder to my sister to the utter amazement of the group. Since that day, my friends regard me with the suspicion and mistrust due to a wizard. At a friend's party and everyone's having a good time. I'm practicing through the fire and flames on Expert on Guitar Hero. No one's paying attention to me, but someone calls my name from the adjacent room. The solo is playing, but I practice this song twice a day, so I go into the kitchen to see who called my name. My friend was just wondering where I was, but I hear behind me, "Who the frick is playing Guitar Hero?" I walk back into the room with everyone staring at me because I only missed one note for the whole 20 seconds of the solo that I was gone for. I didn't think I'd memorized it. When I'm too lazy to get up to get something, I'll just say, "The Force will get it for me," and be annoying about it. Eventually, a friend will just bring it to me, to which I reply, "The Force has a strong effect on the weak-minded." I'm the mother of a toddler, a 3-year-old, and anybody with kids can tell you that this will hone your reflexes to a sharp point. I can catch dropped objects in an instant without looking, much like Jolie in Mr. and Mrs. Smith. This is only particularly impressive when the dropped object is a full drink, but whatever. I'm also an expert at dodging thrown objects and navigating Lego-strewn rooms with amazing speed and agility. Oh, and the whole "mum has eyes in the back of her head" thing? It's because you learn to hear that crap. I can hear the snack container in the pantry being opened from the laundry room with the washer and dryer running, so don't even try it. I stare at traffic and say, "Start moving now." It hasn't worked yet. My day will come. I used to work for Adopt-A-Pet as one of those annoying guys you hate collecting money for the shelter on street corners. We always worked with partners in 3s or 4s covering all parts of the intersection, and one day when the workday ended and we were heading back to the van to head back home, I legitimately just felt something off and I grabbed the girl I was walking with when she was about to cross the street, in a crosswalk with a sign reading "Walk" and the light red. Just then around the corner sped an SUV and several police cruisers that would have absolutely pancaked her. She was quite grateful. I was telling a story to some friends and another friend wanted me to shut up, so he threw a closed Swiss Army knife at my head from a direction I wasn't looking. Right at that moment I was moving my hand in the "these are not the droids" motion, and I blocked it. I didn't even slow down the story. I finished it and just looked at him. Definitely not the best, but worst. Still, Jedi. So I was hanging out with a new friend, I was a freshman in high school, that I had just met that semester. She was funny, cute, and happy. Well, one day we were over at a friend's house, jumping on his trampoline, when we go in for some lemonade. We're sitting around laughing, and she gets a phone call. We hush up so she can hear. Her face goes from chill happiness to a straight face. She hangs up the phone. I look at her and say, "What's the matter? Your grandma die?" She couldn't hold it in. Tears burst, and she booked it out of the room. Her grandma had just died, and I made a joke about it. Impressive, but probably not cool. I can hypnotize chickens. Congratulations, you're the one superhero less impressive than Aquaman. But don't worry, if you become a Batman villain, you're still in the middle of the list in terms of awesomeness. Calendar Man, the Condiment King, and Armless Tiger Man ain't got nothing on you. I was driving in the car listening to XM radio. I told my friend what the next song was going to be, and it came on. I was pretty shocked myself. The summer I was 18, I was a lifeguard at a swimming pool. One day, me and my colleagues got wind that Sum 41 would be performing in a nearby city. I was an avid fan at the time, and so I made up my mind to go. Little did I know, 2 of the girls I worked with were also fans and managed to book off the date. We didn't have a lot of staff, and so because they booked off before me, their request was accepted and mine wasn't. A few weeks go by, and the day before the concert, the girls thought it would be in good taste to come and tease me about it. "Ha ha ha ha, have a good day at work tomorrow." Crap like that. I was annoyed, but a good enough sport not to take it to heart. So I answered, "You're going to get there and they won't even play. Something terrible is going to happen, just to rain on their parade." Sure enough, Sum 41 cancelled their performance due to the lead singer injuring his back. Next time we all worked together, it was as if I was personally responsible for the accident. In short, I accidentally cursed Sum 41. One time I perfectly predicted the Simpsons couch gag. It was the Monty Python foot one. Just as the couch comes into view, I say, "Foot," and like magic, the foot comes down, crushing the Simpsons family. A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, it was circa 1970. A bunch of us were doing some acid. I went to Longwood Gardens near Kennett Square, Pennsylvania. It's a huge former DuPont summer estate that's now a botanical showplace. The greenhouse is spectacular, with more plants from more different climates and environments than you can imagine. Taking green herb or whatever and going there was one of our favorite pastimes. It was just so pleasant and so cool. Anyway, there we were, 6 or 7 of us, both genders, wandering around all messed up, and we came upon a water fountain. It was like marble or something coming out of the marble or something wall. Everyone was thirsty as heck, but nobody could find the device for making the water come out. There was no handle, no button, no lever, nothing. Just a marble block with a stainless steel basin and a spout. Now, keep in mind we were all corked out of our gourds. I noticed that there was a metal round thing on the floor near the fountain. I surreptitiously slid my foot over it and said, "Watch this." I uttered some incantation as I waved my hands around in the air, then finished with a flourish, pointing to the water fountain as I applied just the slightest pressure to the thing under my foot. Water came shooting out of the fountain. I wish I could even begin to describe the reactions of my friends. It's impossible. I did it several more times and they got further and further mind-effed to the max. Talk about going bat-crap crazy. That's all. After a few times, I revealed the secret. Watching their relief was almost as funny as watching their minds come unraveled. I was talking to the guy next to me in lecture one day, before class started, just chatting about how the class was going. Moments before, the guy in front of my seat propped his guitar against his seat and left the room. For the bathroom or vending machine, I assumed. It should be noted that I had the aisle seat. Paying no attention to his guitar and still talking to the dude next to me, I suddenly see something falling sideways in front of me and into the aisle. Without thinking, I quickly propped my leg up and caught his guitar on the lower portion of my shin. It would have hit the aisle stairs pretty hard. I put it back against his seat and gathered myself. He came back right as the lecture started, so I never mentioned it, which made it look like I do these kinds of things fairly often. I felt pretty ninja until I had to start taking notes. When I was about 10 years old, I once called and rolled 3 double sixes in a row in Monopoly. I think that's a 1 in 46,656 chance. In a game of Warhammer 40k, I witnessed 25 out of 26 dice rolled simultaneously, all coming up as ones. Playing Super Smash Bros. With friends, 2v2, and my partner was out and I had 1 life left. 2v1 basically meant that there was no chance. I was playing with Captain Falcon, who I'm terrible at, and they had a combined 3 lives and were both historically far better than me. I said sarcastically, "How much do you want to bet I can win with just Falcon punches?" And 5 minutes later, I accepted my $20. Still to this day, don't know how I pulled it off. Dead lighters. When I say a fake prayer to the fake god of lighters, very solemnly, and then try to light it, 9 times out of 10, it ignites just the once to light my cigarette. Then when I hand it back to its frustrated owner, it doesn't work again. It sounds cool, but I've actually discovered it annoys the crap out of people. I was at a mall once, and there was this old bingo number picker machine thing on display. You know, you turn the crank and all of the balls with the bingo numbers shuffle around until one gets picked. A girl I was friends with was turning it and told me to guess a bingo number. I guessed the first number that came to mind. It was like I-20 or some crap like that. Sure enough, when the balls fall out of the cage and she reads it, it was I-20. She was amazed. 1 month later, I started dating her. In short, guessed a bingo number correctly. Resulted in wooing a girl. I was in Las Vegas with a few friends and we were walking around the casino floor looking for a game to play. We were passing a roulette wheel when I stopped and was staring at the number board of previous spins. I do this for about 2 to 3 spins, then quickly put down money on one of the thirds. The spin ends, I win $600 and casually keep walking. I speak the dialogue in movies and TV shows before I've heard it. So much of it is so predictable, setups that line up a mile away. Alright bosses, what was on someone's CV that took you straight to hell yes or hell no? I had a resume from a potential interview candidate that listed his reason for leaving his last job as, "I found a buddy." No further explanation. You bet your sweet patootie I called him in for an interview. As a strategy to get an interview, it worked. The condensed story is that he found a body while walking the grounds at his job, checking to make sure all gated areas were secure and clear of debris. When he found the body, he called the police. He was fired because he broke internal reporting protocol. He was supposed to notify his immediate supervisor and not outside authorities. It was the supervisor's responsibility to call the police. Somebody sent over their CV written entirely in papyrus font from Microsoft Word. May as well have gone all out and used windings. I was hiring for a very competitive IT role last year, and one guy, who didn't have the best real-world experience, added a single QR code at the bottom of his CV. I scanned it and it took me to an online portfolio, including a secure lab with simulations he'd run, allowing me to test scripts he had written and also play around in his lab environment. Honestly, I've never seen anything like it. The guy got the job and has continued to be a great fit. I had someone hand me a resume with the HTML code of an adult website URL mixed in midway through. I guess he was watching naughty things while updating his resume and somehow dragged in a link. Guess he didn't proofread it. One resume read, "Expert in indoor horticulture." Indoor horticulture was in quotes. I received a resume from an applicant that included a letter of recommendation from his cat. The letter was hilarious and signed with a clip art paw print. I thought it was great and I wanted to bring him in, but the manager for the position wasn't crazy about it. I guess the point is, humor in an application can work from you, but it really depends on who's reading. Second language was Klingon. Too bad the guy was a total jerk during his interview. A guy put his bench, squat, and deadlift numbers on his personal skills section for a bar job. It spawned a long tradition of asking bartenders what they could bench when they applied for a job. I feel like it's a 70-30 chance of this either being the world's biggest D-bag or just having a terrific sense of humor. If he put that and then showed up as the world's scrawniest dude, it would be epic. Hiring for retail. 2 all-time favorites. Experienced at stalking the cooler. Responsible for closing paperwork after each shift. Except they left the F out of shift. Hiring a software engineer. Among his impressive list of skills were Notepad and WordPad. I have several CVs that will never make the cut. I keep them in a non-GDPR-proof binder hidden out of view. I work as an IT recruiter. Here are some of my favorites. Normal CV on the job site. Junior profile, 18 years old, just finished school. Pretty normal CV, except at the bottom he writes that he has a small member and he likes guys. The CV goes back and forth in the office. Eventually we decide to call him and ask why he put that on his CV. Turns out he had to make the CV for school, he left his PC open, and one of his classmates thought it was funny to add that to his profile. A CV with a picture of a man only in his boxers. No headshot, just his abs, boxers, and legs. We did not call that guy. Several CVs with people ranting against the government, religion, or anything else. Obvious proof of people's mental abilities. People writing things such as, I will do the time for the crime I may or may not have committed. I haven't called any of those. So many cover letters with the wrong company on them. Recruiters will forget to change your name when sending you an in-mail. And applicants will forget to change the name when applying. We really need to get rid of mandatory cover letters. I'll still call them if their profile is decent, to be honest. And people being open about just putting their CV online so they can keep their unemployment benefits. At least they don't waste my time. I was working for a small digital agency and we were looking for designers and illustrators. General multi-skilled creative types. The boss wanders in with a sly grin and a big folder. It was from a guy who wanted a job. I came over and he started flicking through it. Page after page of raunchy cartoons. Lots of them furry type stuff. Women's chesty bits, butts, lips, figures intertwined, and lots of detailed musculature. So I was like, well, it's quite good for what it is, but what else is there? Is there another section? Nope, nothing else. Just a folder completely full of cartoon people that looked like they were straight from the page after Rule 33, and a bunch of anthropomorphized animals in compromising positions. He was not hired. It wasn't because of the cartoons, it was because it was all just those cartoons. Would have liked to see some commercial applications of illustration, or something showing he could work to requirements, or a variety of work showing different styles. This was like 15 years ago. I had one application dropped off by the applicant's mother. She told me, if you hire him, you probably shouldn't trust him with money. I threw the application away after she turned around. I was hiring for a sales clerk position at my family bakery. Hello, my good man. I would like to work at your factory. I don't have a factory. Read the frickin' job description. I had a candidate who worked in counseling in the past, mostly with kids who'd been through trauma. They had a line on their resume that said, expert in child kidnapping. I had to at least give them an interview because I understood the intent, but the wording was just hilariously unfortunate. For those seeking clarity, he was an expert in kidnapping cases. No, he didn't get the job. Nice guy, but just not a good fit for the role. A guy said we had to hire him because he had a disability and it would be discrimination if we didn't. He wasn't hired. He called the CEO a few times to complain. We went through it at least 3 times over the course of multiple hirings. Guy submitted a resume claiming to be a ghostwriter for a local college. In lieu of a college degree, he listed the units he wrote assignments for and the average grades his clients got. My concerns were, where I live, many academic ghostwriters blackmail students post-submission for more money, or they send source materials to the lecturer. This in one of the world's top 50 universities. So I could probably expect similar crap in the workplace. Also, how can I trust them with sensitive information like patents or source code or internal IP or client information shared in confidence? Then there's the fact that 50% of the staff would hate this person right out the gate. They'd be miserable and my team would lose morale. If his background came up, it would also be an affront to an institution we often collaborated with. And I already had one butthole making the team's life a misery. Couldn't risk a second one. That's a significant red flag. We used to do a lot of rejection based on gaffes in people's CVs and cover letters. We'd reject on a faux pas. And then we realized we were chewing through good candidates who didn't have the money to use a professional writing service. If we're hiring for a developmental role, someone we expect needs to grow, then we shouldn't hold them to the standard we would expect after they've developed. We decided to start picking resumes for experience we think we want and ignore minor mistakes or odd formatting choices. We even re-interviewed people we think just had an off day. Now we have to do this because qualified candidates for our positions are fairly rare, so we have to be a little more flexible. Had a resume come in from a guy we fired about 2 years previously. Had a gap in his employment where the time was he had been with us, so it's not even like he didn't realize. The confidence to apply for a job you've been fired from. Man, that's something. I had a headhunter submit my resume to a place that I'd quit a year earlier. My old boss called me and asked, "You're not dumb enough to consider coming back here, are you?" Oh god, I can feel the internal cringe already. I mean, I've never been fired, but I have left jobs just because they were objectively bad and I hated my bosses. Even having them think that I was considering coming back is producing a full-body shudder. I work at an escape room. We once received a resume that consisted of a web page address protected by a password and 3 well-crafted riddles that we had to solve to get the password. We spent an hour doing it with 2 colleagues, and it included decrypting a code from a specific frame of Zodiac by David Fincher. It was simply amazing. Sadly, we weren't hiring at the time, and she had found another job when we started hiring again. Since I'm receiving a lot of answers, including pieces of advice on what we should have done, here's some important precisions. And no, we shouldn't have hired her to design a room. First, because we didn't have any room to design, our building was full, and it was more than a year until we needed to create a room. Second, because we already have designers. Remember, there's 13 of us plus the bosses, and we all have the skills she had. Third, because designing a room is a 3 to 4 week job, not a full-time one. Fourth, because it requires other skills than simply creating riddles, and neither you and I know if she had them. Fifth, because you simply don't hire a newbie to design your next 20 to 30 grand room that will be a sixth of your company revenue for the next 3 to 6 years. That's absolutely nonsensical. To the people saying we're idiots for not having hired her, you know nothing. This one was 14 pages. ETA, finance position with 5 to 10 years of experience. There's only so many different ways you can describe financial responsibilities. And summarizing is a skill. The guy never pitched for the interview. I got my first IT job because I'd put additional skills modifying Fallout 3 using GEC. I just loaded custom packs and got them to work, and they gave me a job miraculously even though I was super underqualified. Was looking for a casual salesperson. This 18-year-old put a selfie of her which was taken in a car showing a lot of cleave. Not what I was looking for. I guess she was hoping I was a middle-aged single man. I have incredible attention to detail. I said that once in the email body. Proceeded to forget to attach the CV. Bad emails. When interviewing for a professional position and your contact email is 69 smoker girl 420 blazing, it's a terrible way to start the resume. I had a funny typo on a resume I once reviewed. It read, "Assassinated the lead florist on site." Obviously, it was meant to say assisted. For years, I was applying for jobs with a high school qualification for art and design listed as fart and design. I got 2 jobs in that time and countless rejections. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Had a hairdresser apply for our position. The position was for a nurse. They said they wanted to try out the medical field. No, they didn't get the job. I once saw under achievements on a CV, former world's youngest person. It made me laugh so much I gave them an interview. In the end, they didn't sell themselves well enough to get the role, but it brightened my morning of filtering. Not so much the content of the application, but what was on the application. A handprint. It was for a food handling position, and he was grungy enough to leave a print from where he held down the paper to write on it. Instant no. Looking back, yeah, there was a chance he'd have been fine, we could have taught proper hand washing and all that, but at the time we declined to grant an interview. When every referee has a sentence or two about how we shouldn't call them because they parted on bad terms or it had been a while. Some applicants listed referees who, when called, barely remembered working with the person. I'm surprised he has me listed as a reference, since he tried to sue me earlier this year. Is sadly a true story. I was on a hiring committee for a college instructor. The candidate was asked to provide a statement of commitment to the college and its mission. An entire paragraph was plagiarized, copied, and pasted from a website. I noticed that the writer's voice drastically changed, so I pasted a sentence into Google and immediately found the source. He did not get an interview. I once received a resume written in size 60 font. It was just one page. I was interviewing people for an IT company. Guy put experience with SCSI on his resume. For non-techies, SCSI is a type of hard drive pronounced as he wrote it, but never in a million years written that way. I was working at a job and my roommate wanted to apply. On the application, he wrote, "Can make 3-minute ramen in 2 minutes 50. He got the interview. Hey, that's worthwhile. Even as a guy who can cook well, I still feel like making literally anything takes at least twice as long as was advertised in the recipe. A few years ago, I bought an already working franchise location in the next town over, which is a very small and quiet town. The previous owner let go of his employees with a severance, so I didn't have to take over her contract. Being my new and only store, I decided to work by myself until getting settled and hire help if I seemed to need it. The first day I opened the store, about an hour after opening, the former employee comes by to introduce herself and to drop a resume. I tell her that I'll consider it since she worked there for about 5 years, mostly on her own. The previous owner was not a hands-on boss, and I put her CV in a drawer. During the rest of the day, I noticed people standing on the sidewalk looking in, and after doing that, they came in and made a purchase. After 4 or 5 people did this, I asked a woman what made her look before coming in, and she said, "Oh, I wouldn't have come in if that red-headed C-word was still working here." Needless to say, I put an "under new management" sign on the door using the back of the C-word's CV, and nobody else looked before coming in that day. Recruiter here, I have a few. A resume saying, "Hire me, lol." A video interview with another candidate. She was in a hospital bed and just gave birth to her son prior to her interview. Hired. Another video interview, the guy was chugging a Tallboy Coors Light. Had a kid applying to work at a Sam Goody as a stock boy write that he was a petroleum transference engineer for Exxon at his last job. His job was pumping gas. I hired him on the spot. That sounds exactly like something I'd write. I'm not even unironic about it. You should see the crap I wrote on my one. When I was 16 and looking for a job, my only other job before that had been paperboy. I wrote, "News media distributor," or some crap, and wrote bullet points underneath. "Liaison with clientele within the local area on a daily basis," and "used algorithms to compute the quickest supply chain route." More recently, I was a stevedore or dock rat or dock willy, docker, longshoreman, whatever the hell you want to call it. I wrote port operative. I've written so much crap, but maybe that's why I can't get a job. Once I received a resume that had raid leader for World of Warcraft in top guild of a server. This was about 9 years ago. The other hiring managers laughed their butts off and said this guy was a joke, and they all dismissed him. Me, I asked the guy to come in for an interview, and he did pretty well, and I hired him. The reason I brought the guy in for the interview was because I'm an avid WoW player at that time, and I knew the crap that leaders had to go through. Trying to get a large number of people together, coordinate resources and rewards, getting guides together and telling people to up their healing or DPS and not stand in fire. All done virtually via vent and forum postings, meaning you never met these guild members in person. You need some great leadership skills and project management. Also, at the time I was dealing with a lot of people off-site, so I thought this guy would be a good fit. 9 years later, I've left the company now, and the WoW guy I hired turned out to be great, especially in the last 9 years when corporations decided that working from home and virtual meetings were the way to go, to cut costs. His skill as a raid leader translated very well with remote project management and is now the manager of the hiring managers that laughed at his resume. This was at a Fortune 500 financial company. In short, if you stand in that fire, I'm not healing your butt. I once wrote stuff like, able to plug in USB on first try, and can do up to 10 push-ups before going into sleep mode in the additional skills section. They later told me I was invited because they wanted to see if I could really do the first one. I applied with a cover letter, the first paragraph of which entirely detailed my favorite drinks, and the subject line, "Copywriter, will work for beer," to a job I was underqualified for. It caught the eye of the headhunter for the ad agency and was enough to get me an interview. Shortly after that, I was hired and ended up working there for a few years. I remember writing that letter and feeling frustrated because I wasn't hearing back from any of the places I was applying. So I said, screw it, I'm going to write one that's more me. I should note that this probably wouldn't work everywhere, but it fit with the culture of that agency. Plus, the job listing said that I'd be working for beer brands as clients and that free beer was a perk of the job. I was an AV engineering team lead for a startup for a while. A couple of years ago, I was hiring to fill about 30 slots of a very basic AV tech position. I had about 20 applicants at the time, so if you were reasonably competent, you were in. I got one resume and cover letter through our website from a guy who I will henceforth refer to as the screw-up. Every third word on this thing was spelled incorrectly, punctuation was optional, and spacing was randomized. Thinking, this can't be real. I called one of the guy's references. Oh boy, did I ever get an earful from a grumpy business owner. The screw-up in question was so much of a screw-up that he was applying for positions in my area because he was effectively blacklisted from just about every job site and labor company in his hometown, a medium-sized US city with a very, very large audiovisual job market. The reference told me that he'd told the screw-up not to hand his name or number out as a reference, because the screw-up had caused more than $200,000 of damages to the reference company's equipment the previous year. He went on to name, correctly and from memory, the other references that the screw-up had likely listed on his resume. Friendly competition of the reference, and he told me that they'd all say the same thing. So I called around. The screw-up was apparently quite the liability. We did not end up hiring him, but I made some new business friends in another city. We've since collaborated on a couple of larger conference gigs that hit their city first and then our city afterwards, so thanks, screw-up. Wait, so if the guy did $200,000 worth of damages in the one job and had wreaked similar havoc all over his hometown, it's not out of the question that he caused $500,000 in destruction, possibly crossing over the $1 million mark depending on how many other jobs he'd held that he hadn't listed. I mean, I kind of want to observe a guy this bad at doing everything. From a safe distance, of course, behind bulletproof glass. Not hiring, but one time a guy had excessive pickle tickling. We've toned it down, use your imagination, viewers, listed as one of his main hobbies. Not recommended unless you want to hire for a product tester in certain branches. We did check up. He had his CV proofread by one of his friends. Always proofread your friend's proofreading, folks. Hired for a junior UX role. An applicant's CV header was, "Your bubbly UX designer," which was good enough to warrant an interview. In the interview, when we asked what their dream job was if they were in a completely different area, they answered, "Juventus manager." We knew she was a keeper. Someone had spelled "of" incorrectly on their entire CV. OV. I almost wanted to interview them just to see how they remembered to breathe. I know a guy who put that he had a black belt in full contact origami. Well, it is said that jiu-jitsu is the gentle art of folding clothes while people are still in them. I've seen resumes that didn't have a name on them. For the love of God, triple-check the spelling of any names. The number of CVs that simply go straight in the bin because they can't spell my or my company's name correctly is too damn high. Someone sent us a 20-minute long video on why they wanted to work with us. Not hired, it was just too much. Another applicant explained her family situation honestly in the cover letter. She fit our office culture as well as her amazing skills, and we hired her. I saw one resume state that for work experience, hacker, at the internet. They also stated they've been both hired and fired for hacking various things, and have never been convicted of a computer crime. What do you think is proof that we live in a simulation? I don't know if this is just me, but I often have a boring dream of myself in a classroom or on a bus, wake up and forget it pretty quickly. Then, many years later, I'm on a bus or in a classroom, and I see something or hear something that I saw or heard in that dream. Then I suddenly remember that dream and I get really confused. It's happened about 10 times in my life so far. I know the exact moment that I would call BS on reality. I was out for supper with my mother, grandmother, and sister, and after we'd mostly finished eating, there was a moment where my sister and I, across from one another, witnessed the same thing. It was a mundane dinner and mundane conversation, yet a moment occurred that would shock my sister and I. While my mother and grandmother were talking, there was an instance where a white plate between my sister and I shook on the table. It had been clean previously, but post-table shake, a solitary French fry appeared on that plate. At first, I thought I was the only person witnessing this bizarre reappearing act. However, post-appearing, I locked eyes with my sister who had seen the same thing. We still talk about that stupid frickin' fry to this day. Why physics appears to operate under different rules depending on whether you're looking at very big things or very small things. If it's a simulation, they simply faked the big things to save processing power, which is why quantum physics doesn't fit neatly in our understanding of the universe and likely why we're detecting dark matter. When your pen gets lost as soon as it hits the floor, and then reappears right there after some time. In college, I couldn't find my favorite lipstick. It usually lived on my dresser, which admittedly also had a bunch of other crap on it at that point. So I took everything off the dresser, item by item, and moved it to my bed as I looked for the missing tube of lipstick. It wasn't there. Put everything back on the dresser, item by item, and then left the room. Came back a little while later, and the lipstick was sitting by itself right by the edge. Yeah, the physics engine and pop-in of some of the items in our world really does seem to go haywire between the different patches we get for the great computer game that we call life, doesn't it? In seriousness, I think there's a non-zero chance that someone borrowed your lipstick. Well, yesterday, while driving with my daughter in the car, she says, "Dad, I'm starting to feel that this whole human thing isn't real." So I guess that would be confirmed as my first hint. Wait, round about how old is she where she's already either having an existential crisis or contacting the devs? Sometimes you get out of your house and walk past the same people a lot of times. Like you're going to the market and walk past a dude walking the opposite direction. Then you leave the market a couple of minutes and walk past the same guy again in the opposite direction. This crap happens a lot with me, and it's like a ton of people at the same time. It makes me feel like there aren't enough models of NPCs to throw around, so the Matrix just uses a bunch of the same people. You could say the strict laws of physics that govern our reality. If we were in, say, a video game, we'd eventually start wondering why the rules seem absolutely rigid and mathematical. Maybe the speed of light is just the speed limit for transmitting information within the network of our simulation. Also, there seems to be limited resolution due to Planck's constant. Our graphics card must be frickin' insane though. Our render distance is essentially infinite. The quantum eraser. Quantum physics as a whole feels like a huge developer shortcut. Things only exist in a definitive state when they're interacted with. Kind of like a graphics card only rendering things when your character is looking at them. When you run into someone you don't know and you both just stare at each other thinking, "You look familiar, do I know you?" And then ask a million questions trying to figure it out and come to the conclusion that you don't in fact know each other. Then you walk away still wondering why that person looked so familiar. So, at my first job after college, I ran into this guy in the smoking area and he said, "Hey, how's it going?" I knew him right off the bat, but I'm absolutely horrible with names. Plus, I couldn't quite place him. Did I know him from high school? College? Friend of a friend? Academic conference? Someone I interviewed for the paper? So I talked with him for a few minutes, waiting for the guy to drop some sort of hint to trigger my memory. Finally, he looks me straight in the eye and says, "You don't remember me, do you?" And I was so embarrassed, but I freely admitted it and asked him to remind me. He gets this stunned look and says, "Oh crap, really? Because I've been waiting for you to say something to remind me. We've known each other 22 years and have been a couple for 20 years, and been married for 12 years. We still don't know when we met the first time. We have a couple of guesses, but don't know for sure. The weird part is that we figured out that there were multiple times we should have met, but didn't. We knew a lot of the same people, but at different times. The guy I went to college with was someone he knew in junior high. His best friend's girlfriend shared a high school class with me. I was acquaintances with a girl he dated just before he enlisted in the Navy, which was right about the time I moved into the area. The oddest one was that we should have met as young kids. We should have met when I was in first grade and he was third grade, because we both qualified for an enrichment program that year. But my family was going to move later that year, so my parents kept me out. So yeah, we know the second time we met, but not the first, and should have met earlier, but kept missing. Déjà vu. It's similar to déjà vu, but it's where you've dreamt of a future moment. It's weird, and for me it hasn't been useful. But one moment I'll be experiencing life and just know what's going to happen because I saw it in a dream. I'll even know about my futile attempts to change it from the dream. It only lasts a couple of minutes at most, and it's mundane moments, but it is freaky. Before cell phones, I accidentally misdialed a person's number and got the correct person at somebody else's house, with the wrong number being 3 numbers off. I talked to her for about a minute, and she asked me how I got her uncle's number. I said I didn't have his number, I dialed hers, and we both fell deadly silent thinking about how bizarre it was. The observer effect in quantum mechanics. When something is in multiple states at the same time and when you measure or watch it, you force it into a state. It just looks like a computer saving resources by not loading useless crap. I get that there's probably something behind it, and it's not actually the fact that we're watching it that does something, but if tomorrow we were able to prove that we live in a simulation, then this would have been a hint. That thing where you go into a room for something and then forget why. Like a sim who had their action cancelled. That can't be for no reason. That was someone in our simulation cancelling our action. I mean, my explanation for this has always just been that I'm a dum-dum, but if you think that your brain is unassailable and would rather literally find any other explanation for an attack of the stupids, be my guest. The following commenter has a suggestion. That's actually because your brain compartmentalized thoughts based on location. New room equals new train of thought equals what the heck did I walk into this room for? I don't think we should be answering this question. It's clearly a bug survey. Nice try, simulation developers. Dreaming. How it could be a gateway to another universe or version of yourself, and how do we manage to forget those dreams, especially the important ones. In high school, I downloaded an app that would wake you up when you were dreaming so you could write them down while they're fresh in your memory. After a few months, I lost that phone and forgot about the app. I recently downloaded the app to find out that all of the stories were kept through my account. I couldn't have told you a single dream I wrote down in there because I completely forgot. But the moment I read my own stories, written in a groggy, barely awake grammar, I was immediately teleported into the exact scenarios of the dreams. I could all of a sudden vividly picture the smallest detail of the dream simply after reading a few words. It was wild. Often when I learn about something new that I've never heard about, all of a sudden it starts appearing randomly in some TV show I'm watching or a news or Reddit article. They should really fix the targeted ad algorithms to make it less obvious that I'm living in a simulation. Gotta say, the karma system for real life is broken as frick. I think the clearest sign is the need to sleep. Gotta reset the system or it slows down, has glitches and deteriorates because it can't clear out the useless junk and it runs out of space. Extreme synchronicity. People write it off as coincidences, but I sometimes don't. Some people get sick for no reason, and some people who should be sick because of how they live seem super healthy. Millions of years of evolution and we can still accidentally bite our own tongue? That's some bullcrap, man. Black holes could be a glitch. Black holes are the deletion program of the simulation. Periods. Let's leave a trail of blood for predators to follow at the same time that I'm curling up into a fetal position from cramps. Super suspicious. Sounds like it was made by the same people who put Sims in a pool and removed the ladder so that they drown. Children who are convinced that they've lived before and know sometimes verifiable facts about the person they think they were. The Joule slit experiment. Basically, light acts like a wave when you look at it. But if you look really closely at light, you see it's not a continuous wave but made of teeny tiny particles called photons. These photons, when there's loads of them, affect each other so that they act in waves. Seems simple. However, when you fire photons one at a time at a piece of card with two slits in it, they still act like they're being affected by lots of other photons around them. So whoever designed our simulation wanted to model light using waves, but it was too complex, so they made photons instead. The same way a curve in a video game is actually made of square pixels. They never figured we'd get smart enough to experiment on individual pixels. As Neil deGrasse Tyson likes to say, if we ever discover that we can simulate the universe, then we're more likely than not living in a simulation ourselves. My wife. How can someone be absolutely perfect for me and I met her by mere coincidence? The fact that the moon and the sun can just about perfectly eclipse each other. What are the odds that the moon and the sun would be the sizes they are and distances from the Earth that they are to allow that to happen? You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Being depressed despite any reason. I have a perfect family, I'm annoyingly optimistic, I do everything, and yet here I am. It's like someone is just pushing the be more sad button for craps and giggles. The Gates of Hell. It's a crater that's been burning for over 40 years straight. I'm pretty sure it has something to do with it being in a desert and surrounded by gases, but the fact that it's been like that for more than 40 years is insane. There's also Centralia, Pennsylvania, a town where they accidentally lit underground coal seams on fire, and the entire town had to be condemned because it turned the air toxic, and streets would collapse with no warning, and fire would just erupt from the ground unpredictably. It's supposedly going to burn for at least another 250 years. Like, come on. The devs weren't exactly subtle with that one. Collapsing ground, spouts of fire, poison gas clouds. That's literally a generic video game level. Look around the room that you're in. Choose any random object within the room. What does it feel like to lick that object? You know what it feels like to have licked it, but have you ever? Single biggest glitch in my book. I'm pretty sure I actually have licked most of them. Whenever you're driving down a straight road on a hot day and it has a road mirage that looks like parts of the road haven't rendered yet. Appendixes. Screw those things. Haven't they discovered that it's necessary now? The farm for your gut bacteria? Okay, I'm learning that it's not necessary, but it might be beneficial. The reason it could be beneficial is up for some debate. Constant speed of light. Quantized space, time, and energy. Slowing down time as speed increases. No information out of event horizons. Increasing quantization at higher energy levels. I'm convinced we're in a simulation already. The year 2020. From start to finish. There's no way that this isn't someone testing mods and messing with us all. Somebody's playing Plague Incorporated with our lives. As an aside, the narrator has been considering buying that game. Anyone able to testify whether it's any good? Maybe I can see if the little people react as stupidly as the rest of us did during the pandemic. Every field of study, including science, runs on assumptions that we can't prove, and no matter how much research we do, we end up with loose ends. For example, we can't prove that the laws of physics have always been the same. We just have to assume that they've always been that way when we run our models. My buddy, who just finished a PhD in material science, likes to say that when you go deep enough into research, you find out that everything we do, all the structures and theories and everything else, is resting on clouds of uncertainty. The Bermuda Triangle. Why has everyone disappeared there? Literally some of the busiest shipping lanes in the world with thousands more pleasure craft, commercial trawlers, and private and commercial flights traverse the area routinely, but yeah, sure, everyone disappears there. When street lights shine through leaves, the shadows on the grounds are perfect grid patterns, like poorly rendered shading effects. The Mandela effect, a phenomenon where a large group of people share the same false memory of an event or detail. This collective misremembering often involves specific, vivid details that contradict documented reality. The term was coined after many people recalled Nelson Mandela dying in prison in the 1980s, despite his actual death in 2013. The idea or concept of needing to prove our self-worth. Why do people have to prove their self-worth in the world? Isn't it enough just to exist? It's a strange phenomenon. It fuels a lot of chaos that has existed or is existing in the world, and it makes absolutely no sense. Missing items like keys or tools. Those things you're positive are there, but aren't when you look, and then reappear after you go back to look. Character glitches, also known as seizures. Murphy's Law. Everything that can go wrong will go wrong, but it only applies when you think about it before doing a thing. It's like a secret cheat code in a game, except it's the opposite. Chameleons. Way too many plot holes there. If they can change color, how do we know that they're green? What's up with their tiny little hands? And don't even get me started on their nightmare tongues. Putting something in one spot, going to get it and it's not there, fast forward days, weeks or hours, and now it's there again. I don't know about you guys, but this happens to me a lot. I don't think that I'm that scatterbrained because I specifically remember putting, say, my glasses on the bedside table. Then they aren't there, I go look all over the house, come back into the bedroom, and there they are, on the bedside table. Abraham Lincoln was elected to Congress in 1846. John F. Kennedy was elected to Congress in 1946. Abraham Lincoln was elected president in 1860. John F. Kennedy was elected president in 1960. The names Lincoln and Kennedy each contain 7 letters. Both were particularly concerned with civil rights. Both wives lost their children while living in the White House. Both presidents were shot on a Friday. Both were shot in the head. Kennedy's secretary, last name Lincoln, warned him not to go to Dallas. Both were assassinated by Southerners. Both were succeeded by Southerners. Both successors were named Johnson. Andrew Johnson, who succeeded Lincoln, was born in 1808, and Lyndon Johnson, who succeeded Kennedy, was born in 1908. John Wilkes Booth was born in 1839, and Lee Harvey Oswald was born in 1939. Both assassins were known by their 3 names. Both names are comprised of 15 letters. Booth ran from the theater and was caught in a warehouse. Oswald ran from a warehouse and was caught in a theater. Booth and Oswald were both assassinated before their trials. Fog is just a draw distance limitation when the majority of memory is being used elsewhere in the simulation. The speed of light. I mean, a constant? That makes no frickin' sense, and honestly probably has more to do with the simulation maximum processing speed. High-pitched ringing in your ears. Or is it just your brain syncing with the cloud? Déjà vu. Any explanation that has been offered sounds a whole lot like science pulling the "that's not a glitch, it's a feature" routine. Black holes are definitely a hole in the map. What's through those things? We haven't got the faintest idea, but once you go through, good luck coming back. Australia. It's the first content of a DLC we never got, and now it just feels off somehow. It was going to be the one you play when you've beaten the rest and are growing bored. The Fermi paradox. The following are some of the facts that together serve to highlight the apparent contradiction. There are billions of stars in the Milky Way similar to the Sun. With high probability, some of these stars have Earth-like planets. Many of these stars, and hence their planets, are much older than the Sun. If the Earth is typical, some may have developed intelligent life long ago. Some of these citizens may have developed interstellar travel, a step humans are investigating now. Even at the slow pace of currently envisioned interstellar travel, the Milky Way galaxy could be completely traversed in a few million years. And since many of the stars similar to the Sun are billions of years older, the Earth should have already been visited by extraterrestrial civilizations, or at least their probes. However, there's no convincing evidence that this has happened. We're in a simulation that more advanced humans are running to see if and how the humans in the simulation, us, find out that they're in a simulation. Then the humans that made our simulation can use that to determine if they are in a simulation, just like deGrasse Tyson said. Simception. Not seeing baby pigeons. Like, where the frick are they at? I'm sad to break it to you, but they exist. And they are ugly as hell. I've had 5 pigeon babies hatch near my balcony. They're nasty. I didn't believe birds were real, but yeah. You know what? The narrator is not at all surprised that the offspring of the most annoying bird to grace my gutters is ugly as hell. Just goes to show that feathered rats have no redeeming features. Nobody likes you, pigeons. I've had some real weird coincidences in my life, like statistically unbelievable. I was born in a really small town and moved 700 miles away when I was 5 years old. I grew up with a girl that was born a day before me in the same hospital, and we didn't realize we were from the same town. My bus driver in middle school was from the county over. I ended up becoming best friends with a guy I skated with in college and high school who randomly dropped our hometown's name. Later on, maybe 12 years later when I was bartending, I was giving a coworker crap for his northern accent, and then he told me our hometown's name again. I ended up doing AmeriCorps or volunteer stuff, and I wanted to go as far away as possible. 17-hour drive over 1,000 miles. Turns out the county name was the same as my birthplace. There's some other stuff with numbers, but it's zip codes and I'm going to keep that private. Doppelgangers. Enough said. I feel like I really need to light up some green herb before reading all of the answers here. The never-ending lightning strikes that keep happening in that one town in Venezuela. They've been going on for centuries. It's called Catatumbo lightning. When you can't sleep at all and you try everything to sleep but seem unable to, then that means that the sleep servers are full and you've got to wait until the servers give you a spot. The platypus. It's just so different than any other animal module. Lucid dreaming. When did you realize a child might actually be the devil? My younger brother is a psychopath. We are 13 years apart. When I was very pregnant with my second child, he tried to drop-kick me in the stomach and said he wanted to get rid of my little one. He was mad because I wouldn't let him play a video game. Another time, when he was around 6 or 7, he took a baseball bat and jumped on the neighbor's car hood and started bashing it on the hood and roof, making dents. The neighbor came out horrified, and when he yelled at my brother, my mum came out and threatened to whoop my neighbor's butt. My mum is part of the reason my brother is such a little turd. He's 17 now, and I'm sure he'll end up in prison someday. I did childcare for a family with 3 kids. A girl who was 10 and 2 boys who were around 8 and 5. The youngest boy was a jerk, to be honest. He was just mean. He'd hurt his siblings and me. Obviously, a 5-year-old doesn't cause much damage, but he'd really dig his nails into you, pull your hair, stuff like that. And he'd find it funny. He was also kind of manipulative and knew that he could get away with anything, and seemed to play on that. He was extremely angelic looking, blonde hair and blue eyes and cherubic face. but he was a monster. One winter evening, I picked up the 3 kids after some school performance and went to the local cafe. It seemed all of the parents were going there to socialize, and we were all being picked up by the family's mum. So I was chatting at one of the tables with the parents while the kids played around. There were probably 15 kids of varying ages running around causing havoc. Suddenly, above the din, I hear a scream of pain. Quite obviously, a different noise to the normal yelling and shrieking. I was too far away to see what had happened, but I got a horrible feeling in my stomach. Then one of the siblings ran up to me and told me what had happened. Apparently, the 5-year-old crap bag had grabbed the hands of another kid and pressed them against the boiling hot radiator, holding them there while the kid screamed. I ran over and berated him. The mother had already got to her own child, and he showed not 1 ounce of guilt or remorse. He was smiling when I ordered him to apologize to the other boy. Jesus, I'm half convinced he's a budding psychopath. Myself and all the other neighborhood kids used to catch frogs, salamanders, newts, the usual things. We even had it down to a ridiculous level in retrospect, where one of my friends could perfectly imitate the mating call of a tree frog. She was a sweet girl, grew up pretty weird later on. Her little brother was a bit crazy though. We had those styrofoam rockets from a museum of science where the hollow rocket sat on a plastic cylinder. When you slam down the whole apparatus, the air pressure would shoot the rocket up into the air 20 to 40 feet or so. Well, her little brother stole our frogs one day and put them in the rocket. Cue my friend screaming in horror as she realizes what he's about to do. Those frogs more or less exploded inside the rocket. We stopped using that rocket. Well, we don't know that he knew what would happen. No idea how old that kid was, but it's entirely possible that he wanted to make astronaut frogs. The sad part is, if he wasn't a psychopath, this will probably haunt his thoughts from time to time. And also, if you hadn't already worked it out, there are some messed up stories coming up. You've been warned. I work with emotionally disturbed kids, so, I see a lot of kids doing evil stuff. The worst one was when a kid grabbed a 3/4 full carton of milk and peed in it to fill it up. He then, calm as anything, yelled for the principal to come out. As soon as he walked out of his office door, the kid threw the milk/pee all over him. The principal was wearing a down jacket, and I'll never forget the milky pee soaking into it, covering his face and hair. It was my first week working in this sort of environment, so I hadn't reached the point where I'd normalized it, and was so beyond horrified. Honestly, the calm, creepy manner he did it in, and the joy he got, makes this situation stick out more than the kid who cut up a rat, or the kid who set a frog on fire. I didn't witness it, but it happened at my local school. A 10-year-old girl with a heart defect was strung up with a skipping rope by some kids in her class. I can't even comprehend what those little monsters were thinking. It makes me sick to my stomach that a 10-year-old kid would do something like that. She survived, thought I should add that in. When I was in preschool, some kid, a little mental, snuck up behind me with safety scissors and snipped a hole in my cheek. That's the only clear memory I have of preschool. I was bleeding like crazy. Sorry to disappoint you guys, but it was on my right face cheek, not my rear cheek. My neighbor's daughter, who was 4 or 5, stomped on her rabbit in the garden while chanting, "This is for your own good," with each stomp. I told my neighbor what I saw, but my daughter would never do that. And now we don't even say good morning to each other. I saw my 5-year-old neighbor unalive a puppy for fun, and then he tried to blame it on my brother. Luckily, I witnessed the situation and cleared things up. My cousin, 6 or 7 years old I think she was jealous of the new puppy, so she threw the little buddy out of the window. I remember her mum telling us well, kids do crazy things, with an awkward smile on her face, and being terrified on the inside. I interviewed an elementary student about what he wanted to be when he grows up. He said serial killer. Alarming, but I just responded that wouldn't work out very well. What about a job? So he says he wants to be a police officer. And it's an interview, so I ask him why. Does he want to keep people safe? And he just told me he wants to use a weapon. That was it. I hope he doesn't make it. I was a careers advisor, and a kid told me he wanted to do a butchery apprenticeship. So I started discussing options with him and found him some vacancies to apply for. We set a meeting to start filling in application forms the week after. 5 minutes after he left, his teacher came in and said I shouldn't help him find a butchery apprenticeship because he'd already killed a bunch of small animals, ranging from a hedgehog to his own dog, and was openly on the lookout for a horse to skin. He'd also asked what would happen if he stabbed her in the neck with a compass. So teaching him knife skills was not a good idea. That kid was tall, built, and powerful. My 7-year-old cousin shoved her cat into a duffel bag and zipped it shut. Kept it in there even after it peed itself and threw up. Needless to say, my family found a better home for the cat. When I was about 4, I did this. Not till it peed itself, but my cat was my best friend and I wanted to take her to school with me. My mother quickly helped the cat before anything went too bad. When I was around 8, me and a couple of friends found a pretty large horned lizard in my grandmother's backyard. I was always fascinated by animals growing up, so I was super excited and examining how awesome it looked. Then my friends beat it to a pulp with sticks and rocks. I screamed at them that they were the worst human beings in the world and went inside and locked the door. I refused to let them use the phone to call their parents to come pick them up, so they ended up just walking home. Screw those guys. A friend of mine's daughter poked in the center woofer thing of my really expensive speaker system. When I told her she couldn't do this, she laughed in my face and seemed to enjoy my disappointment. She didn't get any flack from it from her parents either, as at their home it's a mess and the kids can do whatever the frick they want. I'm of the opinion, my house, my rules. Don't break my crap, you children of the corn. I want to tell a story I witnessed at a playground. It was along the lines of, older brother is fed up with little brother, so takes a plastic shovel and smashes little brother over the head in the style of Tom and Jerry. Couple of weeks back, I saw my nephew for the first time in ages. My wife and I had kept our distance because he was pure evil. But it had been so long we felt like we had to make an effort and go visit my sister. Well, the little 5-year-old crapbag was now next-level evil. Screaming at his mum, throwing things at the furniture, my parents' furniture by the way, they were visiting, kicking their cat, shouting over the top of us if we tried to calm him down. He frickin' shouted until he was red with rage, veins popping, then stormed off upstairs after we said he couldn't play in the garden because it was night time. My sister was at the bottom of the stairs and I saw her and thought she'd be upset. I looked at her and asked if she was alright and she just sighed, yeah, as though it was the most normal thing in the world. I asked if she wanted me to go talk to him, so I went upstairs and he'd shut himself in my parents' room and was leaning against the door, so I couldn't get in. Obviously, being an adult, I forced the door open. He runs to a corner of the room and I calmly went over to him and made the mistake of getting on my knees to be at his level. And the little crap bag just punches me square in the face. I couldn't believe it. I just got up and went downstairs and said to my wife, "Come on, we're going." And my sister kind of just said, "Okay, that's fair." We'd been there maybe 30 minutes total. I don't think we'll be visiting for another year or two at least. I was the child. The day after my dad had his vasectomy, I kicked him in the crotch. I was only 4, but still. Well, thank you for at least confirming that some of the heinous little monsters turn out okay. I definitely did things that were at the very least quite cruel, and I think I turned out alright eventually. Kids like that face-punchy one might need professional help. Most of us just need good parental correction. In high school, my twin sister connived with my 12-year-old sister to wash the toilet with my toothbrush. They did it after I yelled at my twin for lending my clothes to a girl who was a serial clothes stealer. I got strep throat, and they decided not to tell me until years later. They laugh about it, and my parents were so horrified they refused to believe it despite being confirmed by the culprits. Also, my niece peed on her dad's PlayStation at like 3 years old. She also tried to put her number 2 in his coffee. Some kids at my bus stop shoved the outcast kid into a porta potty and tipped it over, side door down. It was pretty evil. I stopped 2 children throwing bricks at a cat while it was stuck under a fence. I'll never forget it, and I'll never understand how they could have been so wicked in the first place. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. When I was younger, I got invited to spend the day with a friend and her family at her farm. They'd just bought it, and the parents couldn't keep their kids entertained while they were fixing up the place, so I was brought along. I didn't know them super well, and I wasn't friends with the girl or anything, but I don't think she had many friends, so I got invited anyways. My friend had a little brother who, after a while of seeing horses and playing tag, suggested we go catch some frogs or toads. I thought that was great fun, so we all did. And then after we put them in a little area, at least 9 or 10 of the little guys, the younger brother brings out 2 long, twisty metal poles. He takes a frog out and sets it down, and happily smashes his metal pole into the frog, impaling it. I was shocked, thinking, did that really just happen? I was a really sensitive kid, so I started crying and begging him to stop hurting the animals. He told me there was an extra pole if anyone else wanted to impale the frogs as well. His sister told me he does this all the time and tried to calm me down, but it didn't help because the whole time she was trying to soothe me, this kid was choosing the next frog and smashing it. I tried to set the frogs free, but he wouldn't let me. Eventually, I ran a little ways away. I didn't want to be around her brother for the rest of the day. I was too scared or embarrassed to call my mum and ask her to pick me up, so I spent the whole day there, really uncomfortable and kind of sad. Some kid in my elementary hugged the class pet so hard that its eyes popped out. Witnessed my 6-year-old niece trip her 4-year-old cousin so he fell and slammed his head into the concrete floor. She then smiled and said he tripped over his shoelace when the other adults turned around. When I was in a nursery, ages 3 to 4, I was a very anxious kid who was really attached to my mum, to the point where I'd cry for her for damn near an hour when I got dropped off. To aid this, my mum gave me a soft toy, a panda who went by the name of Pindy. I frickin' loved him and took him everywhere, including nursery, to help me overcome my homesickness. Anyway, I was messing around on my own because I didn't get on with any of the other kids, and this random girl just runs up and snatches Pindy from me and runs away. I obviously start chasing her to get him back, and the evil little monster turns around, pushes me into a wall, and proceeds to beat 3 kinds of stupid out of me with my own teddy. Damn near got away with it since there weren't any supervisors in the area I was in, but luckily one of them heard and came to investigate. I was on vacation in Turkey and we had a couple of cats around the hotel. Some stupid kids between 8 and 13 were throwing glass at the cats, and me at the age of 12 told them to stop while trying to impress a girl I met at that hotel. They didn't listen and kept throwing glass at the poor cats who screamed for help. Out of pure anger, I threw glass at them, and the glass shattered right in front of their legs, and a couple of them got glass on their legs and feet. 2 hours later, their father turned up and hit me in the face. Told my parents, and my mum kicked him in the nuts while my dad was violently arguing with some other guy of that family. I don't know how it ended, but we got to stay in the hotel, and they were gone the next day. Don't you frickin' hurt animals, especially cats, when I'm around. I had a neighbor kill my pet bunny when I was 6 and he was 13. She was a baby bunny and I was so careful with her and I really loved her. And this boy my dad made me play with, because his dad would sell mine substances, decided to pick her up by her little ears and just break her neck one day. She was a good girl and didn't deserve what he did to her. 2 things come to mind. First, when I was a child, we had neighbors up the street who I would often play with. My friends had a little sister, who was about 4 at the time this occurred. The neighbor's cat ended up having kittens, and I went to go look at them after they were old enough to adopt, thinking I could persuade my anti-cat parents into getting me one. And that's when I saw the youngest picking them up by their tails and flinging them around while giggling. Her parents barely scolded her. I went home crying, and my family promptly adopted 2 of the kittens to get them out of there. I guess I got what I wanted, cats, but I wish we could have taken them all. And second, I was at a sleepover in middle school where this happened, but I didn't participate in the truly bad parts of this story because, fortunately, my preteen conscience was decently developed. My friends were your stereotypical cool 12-year-old girls, and they decided it might be fun to sneak out and walk around the neighborhood. While on our midnight stroll, we came across a very nice convertible whose owner had left the top down. When they decided it'd be fun to prank the car, I said I had to be up early for some extracurricular, and went back to my friend's house because my parents were strict as frick, and I didn't want to get into trouble for trashing someone's car. I found out the next day they'd tossed bottles of pee inside. I didn't ask if the bottles were open or closed because I didn't want to know, but I still feel guilty to this day for not trying to stop them. Karma got me for my silence though, because after I got my first car, someone smashed the crap out of it in a parking lot and didn't leave a note. A neighbor's kid, around 6 or 7 years old, would throw his 3 cats into the river and force them to swim to shore. He didn't care if they drowned in the currents. I wanted to toss this cruel kid into the river himself. Yeah, a few of us are right there with you. Man, I probably should have predicted this, but there is a lot of very unwanted animal cruelty in this one. I guess I can't put my finger on whether that's better or worse than these kids inflicting it on their peers, though, so we'll just keep reading them all out. Punched my gentle giant of a dog right in the face. Dog had just walked into the living room, in her own home, and the visiting 7-year-old punched her in the face. Kid's mum said, "He just doesn't like animals." Never had them over again. This one is pretty tame, but I thought it would be worth a chuckle. I used to attend a weekly board game club, and some of the kids that showed up there were pretty wild. This one little girl, about 11 to 13 I think, in particular, was a notorious cheat, and usually up to no good. Anyway, she comes up to me with her phone out and starts recording me because I was singing a song and kind of failing at it. She says she's going to put it on YouTube, and I tell her, no, I don't want a video of me singing badly on YouTube. Well, she persists and says she's going to upload it anyway. Knowing the whole thing is a joke, I start saying that I'll take her to court if she uses my likeness without consent. She caves and wanders off for a bit. She comes back a few minutes later, still recording me. She asks, "Hey, the sky is blue right now, isn't it?" And without thinking, I reply, Yes, it is. She wanders off again. About 20 minutes later, she comes back and says she's going to upload me singing again because I gave her consent. Obviously, I didn't. Then she shows me the video she'd been working on for the last while. Hey, is it okay if I upload this video of you singing? Yes, it is. Okay, thanks. I was at a loss for words. This girl's going to be a Fox News journalist one day. When I was renting an apartment in the city, the neighbors had a 9-year-old daughter who had learned in school that if you claim a man behaved inappropriately with you, the police will come. Well, she happens to like the flashing lights. The saddest part is she called 911 so many times with this crap just so she could see the lights that the cops started showing up with no lights and her mother was fined. It was an innocent kid thing, but not really innocent, since she would claim one of several older male neighbors was, well, being really bad. A couple of them were actually brought in and then released, thankfully without the media being informed of the reasons. I had this professor who taught the cognitive psych course a year after I'd taken it. She had been talking to our substance misuse and mental health professor, a very cool dude in my opinion, about how she used to work at some kind of camp for troubled kids. I remember hearing them talking behind me as they were going into the building. Apparently these kids had major issues. An 11-year-old had killed a squirrel on one of the nature hikes. When she asked them why, they said, "I wanted to know what it sounded like when it died." Irrelevant tip: teach your kids they're capable of inflicting adult-sized damage. Growing up, there was a very bizarre and angry kid who lived on the street behind where I lived. He was a bit of a butthole, but unlike most bully situations, the people he was a jerk to were jerks right on back, including my brothers and I. Looking back on it now, he probably had a pretty rough life at home based off the things he did. One story stands out. It was winter and there was snow and ice all over. I was probably around 10 or 11 at the time. I go out back and hear my first childhood dog yelping. I see this kid throwing ice at my dog. He didn't even live in the house behind ours. Some elderly nice couple did. But he was in their backyard throwing ice at my dog and scoring hits on her. Not going to lie, when I saw this, I got my dog inside, and my brothers and I chased this motherfricker down to his house. I'm not proud of this, but I taught him a lesson. I grabbed a big sheet of ice and smashed it over his head. He bled a bit from his head and staggered back to his house, screaming and crying. He never messed with my dog again. He only lived in the neighborhood a few years, and then his family moved away. I forget his first name, but remember his last one, which I won't say here. Hopefully, he got help. I had this little 4-year-old student that I was convinced is completely sociopathic. He was remarkably eloquent for his age and as sweet as peach pie. When the adults were watching, that is. One of the teachers of a class of 3-year-olds informed me that he had made a noose and tried to, well, set up some practical demonstrations with it. He came to me upset, and I asked him what's up, and he says another student wouldn't be his friend. I explained that not everyone wants to be friends, and that's okay. He said, "But I want it, and she should listen to me." They overwrote my Pokémon save file. My little cousin did this. I almost killed him. I flushed my mom's wedding ring down the toilet. She never got it back either. At age 15 or so, I was remanded to community service at a local low-income daycare for smoking doobies in the park. Justice is blind and dumb as hell. So, I'm on the fire escape smoking, and this kid who was small and had been getting bullied by a few others frickin' mercilessly sidles on over to the kid who bullies him the worst, who immediately starts moving away, when the small kid just whoops him like in street fight time. The smaller one then just walks over to the side, knocks his noggin on the wall a couple of times, starts crying, and goes to the teacher to tell her that Justin, the guy whose butt I just saw him kick, I never found out what happened to that kid, and to be honest, I don't want to. When did someone challenge you, not realizing your power level was over 9,000? When we were having a couple of drinks on Friday after work, I was challenged to a little marksmanship challenge by a colleague. Little did he know, but I've been shooting BBs competitively ever since I was 13. That's not to say I'm the greatest, but I've made it to the national finals for my country multiple times and came 3rd and 6th. I have all the special clothes and gear and such that you need to make it to such a level. The next Saturday, we showed up at the range that I always go to. It's not a day I usually train, so luckily not many people recognize me. And I whooped his butt left, right, and center that day. Out of 600 points, he scored about 200 to 250 if I remember correctly. I got about 580, which is around the average of what I used to shoot. He had to buy me a fancy bottle of whiskey, and now we shoot every 2 to 3 weeks together. Fun times! Kind of the reverse for me. I'm a physical education teacher, and I had a student that took a pretty bad tumble in class. Hit her head on the wall. Pretty clear concussion symptoms. So we get her stable, call mum and dad to come and get her. Dad shows up and I start going through the concussion symptoms and treatments with him, letting him know that a doctor's visit is probably in order. Anyway, I ramble incessantly about concussions for some time, and then he just politely nods and thanks me. He takes his daughter and leaves, and I see my principal standing behind me, and he can barely contain his laughter. Turns out the dad is an emergency room doctor, and he just sat there while his daughter's gym teacher gave him medical advice. My friend used to ride a unicycle as a kid. He worked construction, and they were working at a house that had an old unicycle. The other workers tried riding it and immediately fell off. My friend walked over to it and inspected the unicycle like it was the first time he'd ever seen one of them, and said it didn't look that difficult. They all laughed at him, and he said he thought he could ride it. Eventually, one of them bet him $100 he couldn't, and he jumped on and immediately rode it down the street. Okay, my power level is by no means over 9,000 on this. I'd probably rate it in the 1500s. But I've played chess since I was a small child, and I was the best player in the middle school chess club. The guy who owned the pool hall that me and my juvenile delinquent friends hung out in was talking about how dumb kids are these days, and said that he bet that nobody in my group of hoodlums could play chess. I beat him soundly, and then again in the rematch. Aha, the Anna Kramling effect. I do get some enjoyment from watching this unassuming Swedish lady beat every old chess dude that underestimates her. Good on you, I hope you bet that guy money. The property management company for my homeowners association insisted that I received emails that I never received, so I asked them to prove that I'd received them. They said they're sure that I received them. I'm a software engineer, and at the time I'd just finished an enterprise email delivery system, like an in-house constant contact. I knew the rules of the CAN-SPAM Act by heart. I knew exactly how their system worked. So this real witch of a property manager said, "I know how email works, you wouldn't understand." I mentally did the arrogant knuckle crack and started to explain, very methodically, how email delivery works and how they'd track various actions. I spent about 5 minutes detailing my credentials and why I was absolutely certain that they'd never sent me the emails they alleged that I'd received. When I was finished, the HOA board just agreed to waive the fines. I work for a company that notifies customers of deadlines by email. We get customers who claim they never received the email, so the deadline should not apply to them. When a customer opens one of our emails, we know exactly when, unless they've disabled automatic loading of images in their client, so I can tell them, you opened the 30-day warning email on May 8th at 7:14 p.m., you opened the 7-day warning email on May 29th, and again on June 4th. But you didn't click the link until September 24th after you opened the 7-day warning, and then the original 30-day warning 3 minutes after that. And then you clicked the link and received the notification that it was past the deadline. They never respond after being caught in a lie. Medieval Fair 2002. The carny running the fencing game picks me out of the crowd for being tall and challenges me to a bout against the master. Not a lot of people fence, so his gambit probably worked most of the time. But when he handed me that saber, I handed him his butt. When you're pretty good at something moderately obscure, these are the kinds of things you daydream will happen to you. My father trying to explain to me how computers and the internet work after he's called me over to figure out why his computer and internet aren't working. A guy from work challenged me to a tennis match. He must have been a hotshot back in his day, and to be fair, as far as mid-40s go, he wasn't bad. I, however, was national team and whooped his butt 6-0, 6-0. I would have eased up, but when I warned him I'm pretty good, he'd laughed it off. Look, I'm far from an expert, and I'm far from power level 9,000, but I've been told jiu-jitsu doesn't work by several froggy drunk dudes. And it works. It always works. Went to a couple's night once, and the guy had wall-to-wall movies and framed posters in his basement. Super into it. I mentioned I used to be a movie nerd, but not so much anymore. He challenged us to a movie trivia board game, kind of in a condescending way, and I tried to politely decline, but my girlfriend insisted we play. They went first, missed the question, and then we ran the table. Never heard from them again. I'm an Academy Award-winning sound mixer, and almost everyone on film sets thinks they know my job better than me. Written in 2020, it happens a lot lately. I'm a microbiologist, so the number of people who've suddenly taken an interest in the subject in order to be confidently wrong about it is pretty upsetting. I have perfect pitch. It's not a thing I can turn off. Notes simply are a pitch clear as day, much like how red is clearly distinct from green. Anywho, music class in junior high. Teacher explains that Mozart had perfect pitch and walks over to the piano, plays a note and says, and just by hearing it, he'd be able to tell you what that was. Now, can any of you do that? At the time, I honestly had no idea this was a rare thing. I raise my hand. Teacher, with a smug look, points at me and is gobsmacked when I answer correctly with note and octave. He then figures it's pure luck, so does it again and asks me to face the other way. I answer correctly a second time. Tries it with chords, sequences, and 2 hands worth of notes. Still right every time. It ends with me playing back a short sequence after listening to it blind. And that day I learned that perfect pitch is actually kind of rare. A beginning writer asked some advice about a basic drafting method, so I offered my point of view. Some tough guy decided to butt in and say that what I said was proof that I'm not a real writer, and that it was obvious that I'd never be published. At that time, the 2nd or 3rd book in my trilogy was about to be released. I asked the guy not to tell my editor that I wasn't a real writer. While I was in high school, I was the reigning city fencing champion in both the youth and adult tournaments. My high school decided to do a school-wide fencing unit for phys ed, and the coach they brought in to teach all of the students was my actual coach. During my classes, my coach naturally brought me up to help demonstrate the various moves. But for some reason, one of my classmates didn't understand that I wasn't chosen at random. He started talking crap about how I looked like I didn't know what I was doing, and how he could probably kick my butt in a duel. Now, he actually was pretty good for a guy who'd never fenced before, and the first opportunity to actually have a bout, he decided to have a go at me. I picked him apart and did not give up a single touch, and used the opportunity to practice my parry and ripostes. I admit I took a bit of sadistic pleasure in thoroughly beating him. Afterwards, my coach made a point of congratulating the other guy for doing so well against the city champion, which changed his attitude considerably. There's our second story about an unassuming hero being a master swordsman, just like you see in certain fantasy films. Must have been fun for everyone else there to see a real scenario like this go down. My father-in-law challenged me about the capabilities of DVD. Specifically claimed you could only have widescreen video, not 4x3, on a DVD disc. At the time, I was employed as a DVD author. I authored the very first commercially available feature on Scenarist. I'm literally acknowledged in the first edition of DVD Demystified as an expert. I had already by that time personally authored literally hundreds of DVDs with 4:3 aspect ratio. He knew all of the above at the time, yet still insisted that I was wrong. Oh god, most of 2020 so far has just been this over and over. I'm an infectious disease expert, PhD from a microbiology and immunology program, and suddenly all of my former high school classmates think they know more than me. They watch the news and learn a new vocabulary, and they bestow themselves a doctorate. I've been wrapping my family's Christmas presents since a very young age. It's the perfect activity to focus my crippling perfectionism with my overall anxiety-riddled self to create a beautiful masterpiece that would make anyone think twice about discovering the mysteries beneath the colourful paper and bows. I've always just loved to do it, and my mum was more than happy to not spend hours wrapping presents. Flash forward to the company Christmas party in my late 20s. We're split into teams to compete for random prizes. I'm up for the next game. I had no idea what I'd be doing. I see a big cardboard box, a necktie, wrapping paper, scissors, tape, and a bow. I know what's about to go down, and I'm here for it. It's a blind present wrapping challenge. My competitors start talking about how they can wrap presents fast, and I sit there silently staring down that cardboard box, knowing fully that the crowd is in for a show. Blindfolds go on. We have a partner that isn't blindfolded that's supposed to give verbal directions. Just before the timer starts, I lean over to my partner and say quietly, "Are you ready for this?" And she just says, "What?" Bam. Timer starts, partner tries to give directions at first, and quickly realizes that I'm way ahead of her. Before anyone else can even get their paper cut, I've got my box wrapped, taped, and bowed. I even fold the ends in fancy to have the triangles meet. And that, my friends, is how I earned the most satisfying $10 Starbucks gift card of my life and earned the title of Wrap Master. My roommate, who took Psych 101 class at a prestigious university, told me, a master's-level therapist, that the movie Split with James McAvoy was an accurate depiction of multi-personality disorder. Ah yes, many often forget that people with multi-personality disorder can spider climb up walls. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I'm no expert, but people never assume I can play pool. I grew up with my parents going to the pub, so as an early teen I'd play a lot of pool and I got pretty good. There's been a number of occasions where I've gotten us a round of drinks or stuck it to some jerk who's hogging the table. Someone once tried to insist that our state didn't sell booze on Sundays. I've spent over a decade working in restaurants and I'm also an alcoholic, which she knew about but still insisted on arguing with me about it. Well, I'm a veterinarian and I know how to prevent fleas. I get these Karens saying, "My dog is itching and it's not fleas." Okay, but your dog is infested with them. It's not fleas. I'll run a comb and show them hundreds. I empathize with the doctor in Happy Gilmore now. I used to play fighting games competitively all over the world. Never made it to one of the top slots, but I could usually hold my own. One of the best games ever was Super Street Fighter 2. Went to a bar by work one day and they just so happened to have a SNES set up with SF2. I order a drink, pick random characters and just mess around for a bit. Some guy comes in and immediately starts bragging to his date that he's the best SF2 player ever. I asked him to play some games against me and offered to buy him a drink if he could beat 2 out of 3. 12 games later, I'm completely hammered and he finally gives up and leaves. Still don't remember getting home that night. I'm not power level 9000 or even an expert or certified, but there's a specific kind of cargo parachute called a small airdrop training bundle. I can pack those correctly and buy the book in less than 15 minutes. I was challenged by someone who had 5 years experience on me to see who could pack the most in an hour. I had 6 while he was trying to argue with the quality control guy, who'd been packing parachutes for 20 years, over how correct he did step 3. I had a good day beating the guy who just so happened to be the worst rigger in the world. Well, I wouldn't say I'm an expert at push-ups, but I've worked in the fitness industry for 20 years and work out myself pretty regularly. Doing 20 push-ups is nothing to me. I was at a party that was attended primarily by what I would call hipsters. A guy who'd been drinking a fair amount challenged me to 20 push-ups as fast as possible for $20. I won and I got $20. Then another said he'd do the same bet if we went right away. I guess thinking I was kind of tired. I beat him and got another $20. A few minutes later, another guy did the same thing. It was an easy $60. Well, this one's gonna date me, but I was an undergrad when the video game Halo was released. I never really played a lot of video games, but at the time I had a boyfriend who was really into it. We played, like a lot, even went to some college-based tournament games and did well. Fast forward some years later, and my husband and I are at a house party. Someone turns on the Xbox and was looking for a 4th for Halo. My husband volunteers me. The guys were visibly not thrilled, but play along. I wiped the floor with them. Eventually, they decide to team up 3 against me. I still destroyed them. The whole party ended up crowding around us to watch. It was a great night. Haha, yeah, it's funny what comparative experience feels like. I didn't have an Xbox and I spent most of my after-school time getting absolutely destroyed on Halo by my friend. Then, when we went to a tournament, still feeling like I was bad at the game, I realized that actually I was at least in the upper half of Halo players in our age group. It's funny what perspective can make you feel like. Although it seems like you were on a whole other level, as being able to beat 3 journeyman players, who are all teamed up against you, is pretty good. Pool water treatment isn't very difficult even for the average Joe. Trust me, you don't need to pay someone $100 a month to treat and clean your pool. I love listening to the salespeople at Leslie's, a local chain of pool supply stores, educate me and their other customers. I got into a polite discussion about algae one time and I was told that I was wrong. I explained that I knew what I was talking about. He asked what I did and I responded, "Industrial water treatment." He's very nice to me when I go into the store now. Me and my buddies in the 7th and 8th grade loved GoldenEye. We had sleepovers where we spent every waking second from 5 p.m. till 9 a.m. the next day playing, with no sleep at all. We were convinced that we were the best, but had no real proof because we were only playing against people in our school. Big fish, small pond kind of scenario. Fast forward about 6 or 7 years, my college holds a GoldenEye tournament. Haven't played it in years, obviously. Well, there was a giant problem. My friends and I had always played with inverted pitch on. The issue was that GoldenEye in multiplayer doesn't let you select different control styles for different players. Everyone has to play with the same control scheme, so I was stuck with my controls being upside down. I still won the tournament. I got absolutely rocked in the Mario Kart tourney, but I had my GoldenEye badge. Okay, I'm being told that I'm a big dummy and you can individually set the controls. So for some reason I wasn't able to in that tournament, but I remember the timed mines round was absolutely bonkers as a result. Journeyman electrician here. Had a guy demanding I can put lights in his house without cans. These were not the canless kind either. He just straight up didn't want to pay for cans. Even bought the lights by pallet on some massive sale. A real cheap idiot who wouldn't listen to anything I said about safety or legality. I walked out and told him good luck with his inspection. So it's the Saturday after Thanksgiving a few years ago, and I'm out with one of my old college friends and her extended family. We'd just graduated the year before. We post up at a bar outside of the game. Everyone's pleasantly mid-afternoon buzzed. Her uncle, whom I hadn't met previously, asked what I do. I hated answering this question in 2017, especially with middle-aged adults, because they would invariably try to start something. At the time, I worked at an immigration law firm. Predictably, as soon as I tell him this, he asks what I think about the wall. I give him my usual answer: bipartisan immigration reform, Gang of Eight, yada yada. He tells me not to give him the rehearsed crap, he wants to hear what I really think. I say, oh, I don't really want to get into it, let's just enjoy the game. But he keeps pushing and I've had a couple of beers, so against my better judgment, I engage. This maybe 50-year-old man becomes furious as the discussion carries on because I keep citing court cases and how our immigration system actually works. The kicker is at one point he says, just because you have all these statistics and citations doesn't mean you know any better than me. I just gave up and got another beer after that. Color. It sounds weird, but anytime the color of something comes up and someone tries to correct me. I've been a commercial printing press operator for 20 years. I can spot very subtle differences in colors that most people can't. I am a climatologist. Say no more, fam. It was honestly like a movie. When I was in college, you were limited to only a few guest passes, so it was pretty common to ask people on your floor to sign in friends. So late at night, while we were playing Mario Kart, someone knocked on our door to ask us to sign in their friends. We didn't really feel like going down all those stairs and dealing with them, so we hesitated. That's when he said, "If I beat you in Mario Kart, will you sign them in?" We of course agreed. Little did he know we all played every day all semester long. He was really convinced he'd beat us. We placed first, second, and third, and he ended up in 12th. We still signed in as friends, though. Not quite this, but I learned piano years ago. I brought a keyboard and learned the first movement of Moonlight Sonata, but it was literally all I could play. I just started a new job as a chef in a fancy hotel. I'd been there maybe a month and was at the Christmas party. I sat at a piano and the head chef pointed at me, laughing and said, "Hey, look at John, you can't play the piano." I thought, I'll just act confident and play the only thing I can, so I was like, "Yeah, I can. I've played for years." And he said, "Oh, really? Play Moonlight Sonata then." It couldn't have gone better. He was gobsmacked, and I've never told anyone there that I was actually crap at piano, except for that one song. Let me see. Krull, the arcade video game. A guy tried to hit on me at a house party by challenging me to a game, but he knew he'd made a mistake when I said, "Sure, I haven't played in a while." It was my boyfriend's house and his game. We still had fun playing, though. Solving a Rubik's Cube. My friend bet me $10 he could solve a cube faster than me. He solved it in 1 minute, me 30 seconds. In college, Mario Super Strikers for the GameCube. I loved my GameCube so much as a kid and actually ended up bringing it to college with me. I had so many people that wanted to play or would smack talk about how good they were, only for me to beat them over and over. I have a friend that I beat 30 times in a row over the course of an afternoon, and he swore he'd never play with me again. 5 years later, and he still hasn't. Okay, so the back end of the comments for this video are just absolute video game superstars. We get it, you proved your parents wrong, it can come in handy one day. Take that, Dad. A friend of mine challenged me when I said the dusty bits on the floor below their air conditioner were because they needed to clean the filter. They insisted that it was ash coming from outside through the air conditioner because of fires that had been going on nearby. It was a split-system AC. I work in HVAC. At least once I explained how their unit worked, they conceded. I have a PhD in genetics and I've published multiple papers on viral vectors spreading in a large population. Every frickin' anti-vaxxer and COVID conspiracy theorist. I'm so sick of them. Also, when someone I met at a social event found out that I work in a genetics research lab, he asked the following question. If 2 white Americans go to China and have a baby there, will it come out Asian? I was so shocked that I actually spit out my drink. Oh, this happens to me a lot. I had the unique situation of working in manufacturing in China for 7 years. I moved back 3 years ago and constantly have people explain to me why manufacturing could easily come back to the States, and I emphatically tell them that they are frickin' stupid. Female mechanical engineer. My life is pretty much people challenging me on things that I'm an expert on. Cycling. My younger brother has a personal vendetta against me. Tried to tell him riding 100 miles is not easy. He said, "Man, I can do 100 miles." I was like, "Okay, I stay with you the first 50 miles," and he didn't even make it past 10. Ha! How did shy guys finally meet the love of their life? I was sitting in second day of bio class in college. The class had like 100 or more students in it. I liked to get there early to reserve my seat. Was a very shy guy, and my row was always empty except for me, which I didn't mind at all. Anyway, I was sitting there, and I looked over at the far door to watch the students pile in. A girl, obviously on the tennis team, walks in. 10 out of 10. I look at her, she looks at me, and I look away because I didn't want to be awkward. Next thing I know, she's right next to me and asks if the seat next to me is taken. It isn't. She sits down, and I don't know what to do, but I have to do something. I look over and say, "I'm Ben, what's your name?" and put my hand out. I immediately regret the decision because maybe a handshake is too formal. She awkwardly shakes it and gives me her name. I ask how long she's been playing tennis. She doesn't. She's on the golf team, not the tennis team. I feel like an idiot, but I keep trying. She asks a couple of questions about me. I just got back from living in France for a couple of years. I'm half French, and I tell her as such. She's impressed and asks me to say a couple of things in French. More impressed. Class starts. She mentions how she'll need a study buddy to get through this. I catch on. I tell her we should make a study group. She's all for it. I get her number to set the group up. Class ends, and we go our separate ways. Next day of bio, I get to class a little later than usual. Walk in, and she's in her old spot. She saved my spot. I'm on cloud 9 and never miss a day of bio. We start studying together for exams. Then we start studying together every day. I have a car. I take her out to eat every now and then. She invites me hiking a month later. Just me and her. We go up the mountain to a spot that overlooks the city. She plays my favorite song by Blues Traveler. That's when I fall in love with her. Ask her out on the hike down. She says yes. First kiss. 2 years later, and we're still together. My one apparently hit on me a lot, and eventually got mad and was like, "Do you just not like me or what?" I eventually stammered out an apology and asked her to hang out for Christmas. We've tolerated each other for 6 years this Christmas. Well, my last girlfriend was a friend that I had a crush on. We were playing the dot game, which is where you try to tap the other person's nose and say dot. It leads to a lot of wrestling if you're playing on a couch. I had her pinned down and we were both laughing. And then I just kissed her. Lucky for me, she was thinking, just kiss me already, or else that would have been real bad. I mean, if you're at the dot game stage, kissing is almost guaranteed. Actually, yeah, the narrator didn't know how to feel about this one, as the old just go for it kissing technique can be legitimately problematic. But then again, as that last commenter said, if they've consented to or initiated a game where you're wrestling on the couch, your odds are pretty damn good to begin with. Read the signs, guys. I'd say my boyfriend is more introverted than shy. He and my brother worked together, and my brother asked him to help move a big piece of furniture. He stayed for dinner, we talked, and then I asked him out. He's held on to me tight ever since. Basically, he did some favor and got dinner and a girlfriend out of it. Basically, you did all the work and he's lucky. After drinking 2 bottles of wine, I was talked, against my better judgment, into going to an event at a club with 2 friends. There, I met a beautiful and smiley girl who one of them knew from elsewhere. During the sobering up period, I remembered I dislike people and clubs, so I retreated to the 24-hour cafe and lounge place across the street and just drank tea, where friends and accompanying beautiful smiley girl eventually joined me. She and I talked, and it was great. She wasn't difficult to talk to like everyone else. When we all went our separate ways, we hugged and agreed we should definitely see each other again. After that, we spoke on Facebook, but didn't see each other again for like 3 or 4 months until she said she was coincidentally coming to meet friends near where I live, and that this would be a good opportunity to meet up. I later learned these friends were a ruse. We met at a pub and talked for ages about a lot of our favorite things. I asked if she wanted to come stay at my house, and we've been together for the 2 years since. We live together, and she's asleep next to me right now, and is by far the best thing to ever happen to me. I've never been with anyone before her, and was beginning to give up hope. When I was 19, one of my extrovert friends hooked me up with another introvert I would have never met otherwise. We started off exchanging emails. We lived 200 miles apart. This was in 2005, before smartphones with video chat, and before video chat was really even a thing. I had no idea what she even looked like. Our 8th anniversary is Monday, and we're taking the kids to dinner and a movie to celebrate. Did you find out how she looks like? Oh, I'm still too shy to look. She made the first move. The Sicilian defense, an excellent choice. I asked her out over MySpace. Frickin' MySpace. She inexplicably said yes, and we've been together since, well, MySpace was a thing. My current boyfriend is as shy as they come. He won me over by approaching me at a college mixer and just smiling and nodding while I blabbered on and on about the James A. Garfield assassination. Sometimes listening is all you need. I'm the same way with my current girlfriend. She'd never experienced something like that, so when we first started talking, every once in a while she'd throw in some completely off-topic nonsense. I'd ask her what the hell she was talking about, and she'd say something like, "Holy crap, you actually were listening." A little tipple of alcohol helps me become a bit more social, so that helps. I didn't get her, she got me. She went up to me and said, "You're my boyfriend now." And since I'm too shy to say yes or no, I went with it. We've been dating for 6 years now. Ah, kindergarten. I just want you all to know I'm standing here with a notepad for hints on how to finally get a girlfriend. I went through a 2-year period where I became pretty normal. I met her and got married during that time. I was sociable for some reason that I don't understand now. After we got married, I kind of went back to being my old hermit self. This answer is probably not much help. I just broke up with my girlfriend of 6 years. We met because I was making a conscious effort to be social after graduating high school. Unfortunately, I too reverted back to being antisocial, and now I'm single again. You're a lucky man that she's stuck with you. I played the long con. Knew her for like 7 years, visited her on a job interview in late November, moved up to her like 2 weeks later, and married in March. That was 2.5 years ago, and now we have a 6-week-old daughter. It's been a busy few years. I'm awkward as heck, and I just told dumb jokes to make her laugh. I was always there for her, and we went out on a date up to a lake and just talked most of the night. We've been dating ever since, so my advice is just be yourself. She made me so much more confident in myself, and the past 1.5 years has flown by. She called me to wish me well for my birthday and asked if we could hang out to talk. She confessed she's been in love with me for the better part of a year. It's been 3 months since then. I felt the connection instantly. It almost scared me. I couldn't believe good chemistry could be this good. So yeah, I guess I hit a jackpot, is the answer. I wear a fake cast and trick them into helping me load stuff into my van. My only piece of dating advice is to order steak. Always have an extra piece cut and ready to go. Any awkward questions come up, you pop that in your mouth. Gives you a little time to think about your answers. For me, the trick was to be cool with being alone. I found my happiness, worked on improving myself, and eventually women started noticing me. There is definitely something to the whole confidence is attractive thing. I guess my advice is live your life and don't obsess about being single. Also, going to the gym helps because the better you think you look, the more confidence you project. Yep, narrator chiming in here. I've had massive dry spells in my life where I was just not doing all that great or feeling very good about myself, often trying real hard to meet someone during those times as well. But my best partners have all kind of dropped out of nowhere when I was already doing well, pretty happy and thriving. We just give off a better vibe when we're doing well. Focus on making your life better, sans partner, and whether or not you find one, you will be better off anyway. Oh man, it was my first day in math class. I saw this really pretty, curly-haired girl. She caught my eye and I sat close to her. The teacher ended up being horrible. It was a student teacher. So this girl would ask for help to explain stuff, and I would too after following her lead. Eventually, a group of us were confused enough to where we made a study group, and I still remember how happy I was when I got her number to make plans to study and look over the stuff the teacher didn't explain good enough. I ended up transferring out of that class because the teacher really was just that bad, but we stayed in touch. One night, she had a horrible pain, and her roommates had plans elsewhere, so I took her to the hospital instead of studying, and we bonded on a whole other level. It was like I'd known her for years, like she was instantly my new best friend. And then we just sort of fell for each other after all of the inside jokes and daily help we'd give each other. I know I got really lucky, but it made up for years of bad luck, believe me. I'm a guitar player. They just walk up to me and start talking. That's why I play guitar. That's why we all play, right? He just stared at me a lot, and then I made the first move. That doesn't work for everyone. Believe me, often it has the opposite effect. Somehow managed to convince myself to message her, "Hey, do you want to help me take down our hometown's roving scooter gangs?" And now I'm engaged. It's easy. Just answer thousands of personal ads and eventually you'll get lucky. So there are single Asian women near me. I had a few beers at 1 a.m., went on datehookup.com, clicked on a profile that didn't even have a pic, and messaged her. 5 years together this year, 4 years married, with a 2-year-old daughter. Went from not having a car or job and riding the bus when we were dating, to affording 2 newer cars, and both of us have decent jobs now. Sometimes you just get lucky. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Oh, it wasn't easy. We used to work together, and for 3 months I was asking people at work if this girl I was interested in was single. I asked a whole bunch and never got an answer. Asked my best friend who also worked there at the time, and they told me they didn't know. Took me another month to ask this girl. My friend kept asking if I'd asked her out yet. I had it all planned out. I had a vacation coming up. She worked the Monday night. I went up right before close and bought some crap that I really didn't need, but used it as an excuse. I stayed after and talked to my friend who helped me out. After a while, I started kind of making conversation, acting like I was looking at the schedule, even though it didn't matter to me since I wasn't working. I felt the lump in my throat growing and growing. I knew that if I didn't ask, I probably never would. I felt like my nervousness was showing, and she was probably wondering what this weirdo was doing just creeping around her. I finally got the stones to straight up ask her if she wanted to go for dinner. She looked kind of freaked out, and I immediately started to panic. Then she said with a smile, yes. I couldn't believe it, but instead of keeping it inside, I said, really? I still hate myself for that, but I never let her live down her answer. Yeah, why not? She didn't realize it at the time, but that night is quite possibly what saved me. That was 2 years ago, and we just got married this past May. I don't regret a single moment of it. Bonus, my friend didn't know that I'd asked her out that night, and they didn't know why at the time, but I gave them a loud high five on the way out. I told them both about it a month afterwards. Tinder. We got coffee, walked around Goodwill, and made out in the back of her car on the first date. A couple of weeks later, and we're in love. It's been 2 years now, no regrets. I formally told her that she was my girlfriend now and that she could start sending me undressed pics if milady felt like it. I haven't heard back from her, so I'm assuming that's a yes? I didn't, I haven't, and most likely I won't. College. This hot redhead walks into the house that I'm sharing with 4 friends. They're all over her trying to chat her up. I ignore her. Later that night, we all get drunk. She passes out in my bed, and when I go to make sure she's okay, she asks me to stay there with her. We had some hot adult fun times and played the V-word game, where you rename the movie or video game or book titles to be lady parts themed, like Harry Potter and the Deathly Vajayjays, or Lawrence of Laby. Oh, you get the picture. We stayed up all night laughing, and the next morning I took her for coffee and donuts. Then, 2 years later, we got married. Yeah, I'm still single and waiting. Tinder of all places. I mean, look, I know it has the stereotype, but I firmly believe that you'll find what you're looking for on these apps. I was on it on college, and there was definitely ample opportunity for hookups. Last year, I downloaded it again and started meeting a lot of really interesting people. One girl was going for her PhD at Caltech, another was working for a non-profit that helps cancer survivors. One girl was in town for the weekend and was looking for a weekend date, and I couldn't say no. My point is that if you're looking for a relationship, you'll find it. And if you're looking for hookups, you'll find them too. Well, Wart was all like, I'm going to rule subcon, and then Princess Peach comes along and I says to her, oh wait, shy guys, not shy guys. I was a 22-year-old kissless virgin. I self-published a zine in the mid to late 90s. I put an article in there about how I was lonely, looking for companionship. Some zine friends recommended me to one of their real-life friends. We were married within 3 years, and it lasted for almost 15 years. She's great, and the end was nobody's fault. We were just on different paths. You know, every now and again, the narrator begins to worry that he's too terminally online. Then he gets a comment like this and has to actually search what the frick a zine is, and is reminded that aside from the work he does on his voiceover stuff, he's actually pretty clueless about the internet at large. I'm glad that you and your arty bookie magazine co-author managed to find happiness for that long. And no, I'm still not entirely sure what a zine is. When I was in high school, I was extremely shy. When I moved to a new town, I saw a girl in my homeroom who was very cute and interesting looking. I had a thing for alt girls at the time, and still do, and she had purple hair and was super artsy. I basically stalked her by finding her live journal and reading every post she made. I learned a ton about her this way, as creepy as it sounds. I learned that she really liked books, so I started bringing in weird books on philosophy that I left out in plain view. She started asking me about the books, and I would casually show interest in things that I knew she was super into. Obviously, we really hit it off and would talk on AIM every day. She eventually confessed that she had a crush on me, so I reciprocated, and we dated for around 4 months. First girl I did the deed with, but that's another ridiculous story. Now, many years later, I met my wife at the gym by pretending to need fitness advice. So my answer is still the same. Deception. Well, I don't know about you other guys, but I'm just pretty. Well, I didn't meet a girl this way. I got a boyfriend. There's a lot of guys in MMOs. I don't know if we're quite boyfriend or girlfriend yet, as we've only had one date, but she's a friend of a friend and we met at a gathering. I really hope we become a thing because she's pretty awesome. She's a cat lady. I told her I've been bitten by a tiger. All downhill from there. Marrying her this Friday. I handed her a note so it could do all the talking for me when I tried to ask her out, and thus began our long and awkward relationship. She's great, most of the time. Please send help. I asked her out to a movie, and later she told me she agreed to because it was so pathetic it was kind of cute. Me and a buddy were in high school, PE, bullcrapping around, when suddenly he goes, "Follow me." Then runs up to this girl and smacks her on the butt and runs for it. She looked at me in such surprise, shocked. I told her it wasn't me, but she didn't believe me, so the next couple of days we smacked each other in the halls. We started hanging out and then I asked her out. We dated for 2.5 years and broke up a year ago. Almost exactly a year, in fact. My technique is to be the more attractive wingman. I'm not straight, but I met my husband online where I'm less shy. He's a complete social butterfly, so he took over once we met in person. And now, we're married. Fake confidence. If you fake it long enough, it turns into actual confidence. Kinda wild. I was in a mutual meetup group at a happy hour at a local bar and restaurant. I noticed her shooting me glances more than twice throughout the night, but didn't act. She messaged me afterwards asking if I wanted to get to know her. I said sure and asked her out for a drink. And the rest is history. I met the love of my life by being shy. She took me home and rode me like the Wild West. She said she likes to take charge, but only in bed. I have not told her that I'm gay yet. What? That's gonna go down terribly. You better make a clean break out of there ASAP if there's no emotional connection. It was a joke, guys. I'm straight. Hey, I'm the girlfriend of the shy guy in question. Guy was max-level introverted. He was terrified and unsure and just going along with the flirts that I was sending his way. And that was the exact right thing to do. He put himself in a social situation, and I showed up to consume him. He had the social awareness to know when I was hitting on him, and just went along with it. I did most of the heavy lifting. Hey, you're cute. Let's talk for an hour about Warhammer 40k. We should talk more about Space Marines at another place. Okay, yes, I am touching your chest. But my dude was excellent in being aware of my hit-ons and responding to them, despite the fear that was very obviously there. I like taking control. I find it really, really flattering when a guy is scared of me. My guy was terrified, like virgin terrified, and all the anxiety and self-defeating thoughts and everything were attractive to me. I took all of that fear as a compliment and used it to drive my flirts until, whoops, it's 5 years later and he's met my grandparents. Everything flowed from that single point, and that point was accepting that this is happening, let's just go with it. Shy guys, your fear is adorable. Women will respond. Sometimes we're strong and we'll want to drag you off to play arcade games and teach us how to dominate as immortal Necron overlords. Learn, adapt, accept. Just go with it. I had to get our high school librarian to introduce us. By sheer coincidence, the librarian was friends with both of us, so it was easy. My desired girlfriend thought I was a geek. 30 years later, 22 married, she still thinks I'm a geek, especially with my new Star Trek Bluetooth communicator badge. Well, my wife scoped me out. She thought I was cute. Found my nerdy engineering student aura real hot, I guess. I drove her to her folks' place for Thanksgiving. They live 15 miles from my siblings, and we hit it off. Our official first date was going to a book signing for Words of Radiance by the incredible Brandon Sanderson. I paid her 2,000 pesos. One of my best friends was dating a girl who was rooming with a therapist-to-be. The therapist-to-be had previously roomed with a shy girl. The therapist-to-be psychoanalyzed both of us and said we'd be a good fit. Me and Shy Girl have been married 1.5 years. That therapist is real good. I summoned every ounce of charisma and blind courage in my crappy body and asked her out to dinner. It went well, dated for a year and a half. So I didn't get a girlfriend, so I can't say, but once in my Spanish class, I used to sit with one dude and two girls who I got along with. Every now and then, after class, all four of us would go get coffee before heading back home. So I guess I got on pretty well with one of the girls, because little by little she started being more touchy and closer, until one day she asked me, "When are you going to ask me out?" I would have asked her out right there on the spot, but I had too many unresolved issues with myself, and I basically just got cold feet and left. I kinda regret it every now and again. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.